Chapter 2929, 2929, Who is the Chosen One? Chapter 2929, 2929, Who is the Chosen One? 2929, Who is the Chosen One? Feng Wuding's confidence was reignited. He released a battle cry. It was all right. His advantage lay in the fact that he had more power behind him. At present, he was only slightly inferior to Ling Han. When he advanced to the 4th tier, he would then be able to surpass Ling Han. At the very least, they would be evenly matched. When he advanced to the 5th tier, he would be able to suppress Ling Han in terms of raw power. "Take a finger from me," he said balefully. He gave a tap with his finger, and endless brilliance condensed at the tip of his finger, pressing down towards Ling Han. This attack was extremely terrifying, as if even the defense formed by a 6th tier could be easily shattered. Ling Han's gaze became focused. This tap was indeed extraordinary, condensing all of Feng Wuding's power into a single point. The destructive power naturally increased by tons. This was a very simple thing to say, and anyone could easily think of it. But the power of Heavenly Venerable Tier was already incredibly condensed, and to compress it further to a single point was really too difficult to accomplish. Feng Wuding being able to do this was indeed very impressive. However, could he become the strongest prodigy of the Genesis world of the last era, and even obtain the inheritance of Genesis world just because of this? Ling Han shook his head. This was definitely not enough. He condensed fists of fury and charged ahead to block Feng Wuding's attack. Pu, 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 Pu. After a few consecutive attacks, multiple bloody marks instantly appeared on Ling Han's fists. Those were marks that had been forcefully created, but Feng Wuding did not seem to have the upper hand, either, because his finger had twisted strangely. With the head-on clash, the bones in his finger had also been dislocated, and there were even some fractures in his bones. Feng Wuding finally withdrew the last shred of his pride and looked at Ling Han solemnly. Even the Eternal Destruction finger could do nothing against this opponent. This finger technique was something that he had comprehended through countless epochs of deep slumber and was integrated with some kind of mystical power of the Genesis world. In the battle against Ling Han, he actually couldn't gain even the slightest bit of upper hand. He was filled with extreme jealousy. Even if he was confident that he would be able to crush Ling Han when he advanced to the 4th tier or 5th tier, he actually did not manage to suppress Ling Han in a battle of equal cultivation levels. Instead, he was at a slight disadvantage, which actually made him extremely jealous and resentful. "Humph, then let's have a competition based on background," he declared. The two of them exchanged blows, and after more than an hour, the 1st grade seal that Ling Han had augmented his power with had already finished releasing its energy. Immediately, it dimmed. However, because Feng Wuding had moved later, this seal of his could be channeled for another 15 minutes. Ling Han smiled calmly. Wong. All the 9th grade seals lit up, instantly boosting his battle prowess by more than 200 times. Feng Wuding was greatly shocked. He never thought that not only did Ling Han possess a 1st grade seal, he also had a complete set of 9th grade seals. The might of this far surpassed a 1st grade seal, and under the strike of 3 consecutive punches, Feng Wuding was throwing up blood. "Don't think that you've won," he roared in fury. Wong, 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 wong. 4 seals lit up on his body at the same time, and a terrifying aura spread out. His battle prowess soared, instantly reaching the point where he could rival Ling Han. Pong! The two of them exchanged blows, yet it was hard to decide who was the stronger one between them. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed. These were actually another 4 1st-grade seals, and they were combination seals at that. Let's battle it out. The two of them continued to exchange blows, but their raw power was more or less equal, and the Heavenly Venerable seals were also more or less equal in amplification, so it couldn't be decided who was the stronger one between them no matter what. Humph! Feng Wuding's eyes sharpened, and his right hand tapped towards Ling Han. Wong! A shadow appeared, turning into a world. Dimensional projection? This wasn't strange. Top-notch prodigies would definitely nurture dimensions in their bodies. This was a sustainable path, unlike with the Empress, who was extremely strong at first, but she would slowly be caught up with by others as her cultivation level increased. Boom! The dimensional dimension pressed down. Though its power wasn't extremely overbearing, it was still a dimension after all, so it brought overwhelming pressure. Ling Han also channeled a dimensional projection to meet this oncoming attack. Pong! Although the collision of two dimensions wasn't exactly real, with the condensed power of the heavenly venerates, it was half real and half solid, and therefore still extremely terrifying. Under the clash of such violent impact, both of them were knocked backwards, but they immediately came charging back and fought fiercely. There's more. Feng Wuding roared. He actually channeled another dimensional projection. Ling Han was not surprised. As long as a seventh tier lent a helping hand, a supreme prodigy would be able to nurture two dimensions. Ling Han wasn't inferior, either, and channeled a second dimension. Pong! The four dimensions collided, and the ensuing shock wave was naturally even more terrifying. What? These two people can actually nurture two dimensions inside their bodies? Ain't this? No wonder these two people can battle those surpassing their cultivation level. I heard that even those incredibly freakish prodigies could only accommodate a single dimension. How impressive indeed. Everyone was exclaiming in shock. As the commotion caused by the battle was too great, it had also attracted people from other forces. In fact, Lin Yulian, Xian Shihu, and Wu Haoyang had all been alerted. However, the three of them did not step out to stop the battle. They, too, wanted to know just how strong Feng Wuding, the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era, was. Did you think this was my limit? Feng Wuding sneered. Wong. He launched another dimensional projection. The third one. Everyone inhaled sharply. Feng Wuding actually had a third dimension. This time, even Lin Yulian and the others, as well as Bai Meifan who had rushed over later, revealed shocked expressions. They knew very well that even if a seventh-tier elite lent a helping hand, that would only allow outstanding prodigies like them to possess a second dimension. 3 dimensions, this was unprecedented, and perhaps it would never happen again. Ha 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 ha, Ling Han, how are you going to match that? Feng Wuding laughed loudly. Wasn't being suppressed by 3 dimensions impressive enough? Everyone was rendered speechless. Feng Wuding was too impressive indeed. As expected of the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era. Hold on, someone suddenly said. This was a 5th-tier heavenly venerate of the World Alliance. His voice was actually a little shaky. Don't forget, when Ling Han and I were fighting, he has already used a dimensional projection once. Of course, dimensional projections could be used again and again, but the problem was that the dimensional projection previously had already been destroyed by them. If Ling Han wanted to condense it again, that was definitely not something that could be done in a short while. Since Ling Han had already channeled 2 dimensional projections, then added with the previous one hiss. The heavenly venerates of the World Alliance were all stunned. Ling Han wasn't the slightest bit inferior, and also possessed 3 dimensions. If Feng Wuding was the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era, then was Ling Han the chosen one of the present Genesis world? Ling Han smiled calmly as he channeled another dimensional projection. Pooh! Bai Meifan instantly spluttered. He possessed 2 dimensions, and this was something that he had always been proud of. However, he had never seen Ling Han channel a dimensional projection before, and thought that Ling Han had walked the path of accommodating power of dimensions in his body. Now that Ling Han was stronger than him, he would definitely surpass him in the future. It had never occurred to him that not only did Ling Han walk the same path as him, but he even had to look up to him. 3 dimensions. The members of the World Alliance were even more stunned because they knew that this was actually the 4th dimensional projection that Ling Han was unleashing. A monster. He was truly a monster. Chapter 2930, 2930 Spar my A*S. Chapter 2930, 2930 Spar my A*S. 2930 Spar my A*S. The clash between the 2 great prodigies was a great eye-opener. It turned out that the number of dimensions that the body of a heavenly venerate could contain was not 2, but could reach as many as 3. Feng Wuding was also stunned. He had not expected that there would be another that could accomplish the same feat aside from himself. "Do you think that this is my limit?" he shouted loudly, and the fourth-dimensional projection suppressed down. Fuck, fuck, fuck. At this, everyone's mouth was gaping as they were completely rendered speechless. 4 dimensions, how was this done? Meanwhile, Ling Han smiled faintly. 4 dimensions, and this just barely had the feeling of a son of destiny. However, compared with the tens of thousands of infant dimensions inside his body, this was no big deal. Limited by the cultivation level, even Ling Han couldn't possess millions and millions of dimensions. Right now, he only possessed 19 dimensions. The problem was, what was Feng Wuding's limit? Ling Han was a little curious, but was completely unconcerned. He had not come to spar with him, but merely to deliver a beating. Boom. In a single breath, he channeled another 5-dimensional projections. Pooh. Everyone spluttered. There was nothing wrong with their eyes, right? How could they have seen an absolutely impossible feat? 8 dimensions. Feng Wuding was instantly suppressed and continuously forced backwards. Even his back was bent under the pressure. The suppression from 8 dimensions was too strong, and even he could not bear it, but in the next instant, he roared furiously, and a majestic power surged out of his body. Wong, wong, wong. A total of 10 dimensions appeared around him. This was his true trump card 10 dimensions, unprecedented in history, a supreme miracle. Everyone was also dumbfounded. Ling Han was already overwhelmingly strong, possessing 8 dimensions, which they didn't even dare to imagine. However, Feng Wuding was actually even more freakish, advancing another 2 steps further from the impossible. This was the son of destiny. Suppress. Feng Wuding charged over with the projections of 10 dimensions, his might unmatched. At the level of 5th-tier battle prowess, who could stop him? Ling Han was still silent. He merely clenched his right fist. Wong, wong, wong. Another 3-dimensional projections were activated, instantly turning the tables. Everyone couldn't wrap their head around this. So what if they were heavenly venerates? This had instantly broken the iron rule that had existed throughout eternity, so who could still remain calm? 11 dimensions. Were you trying to defy the heavens? The members of the World Alliance were even more stunned because they knew that the number of dimensions that Ling Han truly possessed would have to be increased by 1. Feng Wuding was also rendered speechless. He was favored by the heavens, and there were actually more than 10 dimensions that could be easily accommodated in his body. However, limited by his cultivation level, he presently could only allow 10 of these dimensions to grow. Though Ling Han only had 1 more dimension than he did, he was still overwhelmed, and there was no way he could catch up. Ling Han penetrated deeply, bringing the 11 dimensions and firmly suppressing Feng Wuding. Everyone was dumbfounded, and then felt rueful. A great many people felt a sense of pride. After all, Ling Han was one of their own. Feng Wuding was a remnant of the Genesis world from the last era, and no matter what, he should be considered an outsider. If it were not for hysteria, they would even have come to blows. After all, the ancient newcomers could also be considered as invaders. Feng Wuding humphed and didn't say anything else. He simply continued to exchange blows with Ling Han. He indeed had 1 less dimension than Ling Han for suppression, but he was only slightly suppressed. But it was not to the extent that he would be overwhelmed. Hence, he could still bear it. He was defiant. He had placed his hopes of victory on exhausting Ling Han's heavenly venerable seals, which would result in his battle prowess dropping drastically. And he still had another trump card. His battle prowess was outmatched, so it was inevitable that he would be hit a few times, causing him to feel great pain, and a strong sense of humiliation rose up in him. He was a supreme prodigy that could surpass his cultivation level and defeat a superior opponent, but now, in a battle of equals, he was actually still being suppressed. However, 2 hours were about to pass. As expected, the light of the seals on Ling Han's body dimmed one after another, and his battle prowess also ebbed considerably. Haha, what is the meaning of background? This is what background means. Feng Wuding laughed loudly. Boom! Another 3 seals lit up on his body. They, too, were supreme and could crush all life. First-grade seals. Heavens, not only did he have 8 first-grade seals, he could even form 2 sets of combination seals, one set of 3 and another set of 4. This allowed his battle prowess to increase by more than 170 times. He still maintained the standard of crushing all with 5th-tier battle prowess. Now, how was Ling Han supposed to block this attack? Everyone shook their head. Who would have thought that Feng Wuding would actually have mastered 3 first-grade seals, and could even combine them? This kind of battle prowess could sweep aside all with 5th-tier battle prowess. Boom! Feng Wuding's palm struck towards Ling Han. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and the 8th-grade seals lit up one after another. However, he controlled them and only channeled half of them so that the increase in battle prowess was only about 500 times. But was 500 times not enough? Pong, pong, pong. Ling Han completely overwhelmed Feng Wuding, throwing furious punches one after another and blasting Feng Wuding like he was a scarecrow. He could only be sent flying continuously. Feng Wuding was completely stupefied. The reason why he could possess 8 first-grade seals was because he had obtained them through the inheritance of Genesis World from the last era, but he had already expended one whole set of Ling Han's 9th-grade combination seals, and he was actually still overwhelmed by Ling Han. He could not accept this. Perhaps he couldn't accept this fact, but it couldn't change the fact that Ling Han's battle prowess was overwhelming. Feng Wuding could only be pummeled. "I forfeit," he declared reluctantly, but he had even less desire to have Ling Han continue pummeling him like this. His arrogance did not diminish, and he thought that this was only because his cultivation level was still too low, so he could not make full use of his full advantage as the Son of Destiny. For example, there were a total of 100 dimensional seeds in his body, but now he had only developed 10 of them into dimensions. As long as his cultivation level increased, his ability to battle above his cultivation level could at least be maintained, if not improved. Moreover, everyone knew that once the cultivation level increased, the ability to battle above his cultivation level would definitely decline. One declined, while the other maintained this ability. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, who would win? Revenge was a dish best served cold. A man who knew when to yield and when not to yield was a true man. Pong! However, he had just finished his words when a heavy punch landed on his face, causing his nose to bleed. "You!" Feng Wuding roared loudly. He had already admitted defeat, so why didn't Ling Han stop? Who would spar like this? Pong! He suffered another punch. "You have gone too far." Feng Wuding was filled with fury. "Do you think I have come to spar with you?" Ling Han finally spoke. "Is that not the case?" "Wrong. I have come to deliver a beating. There is no difference between you and those nobodies, so don't think too highly of yourself," Ling Han said coldly as he continued to throw punches. "What bullsh*** T Son of Destiny? Trash." These words were too hurtful. Feng Wuding wanted to die. He had a high opinion of himself and thought that he was the Son of Destiny. No one could compare to him. However, Ling Han didn't take him seriously at all and ignored him completely. This kind of disdain was something that he could not tolerate. Chapter 2931, 2931 Return. Chapter 2931, 2931 Return. 2931 Return. Yet Ling Han did not care. Just like he had said, he had only come to deliver a beating. Who cared if Feng Wuding admitted defeat, or if he was pleased or not? There was only one word for it: thrash. In full public, Feng Wuding, the Son of Destiny of the Genesis World of the last era, was thrashed madly and completely humiliated. Everyone was rueful. The Genesis World of the previous era ultimately represented the past. In this era, they would still have to depend on the Son of Destiny of this Genesis World, and this person, from the look of things, was Ling Han. Ling Han showed no mercy and thrashed all the members of the World Alliance, inflicting serious injuries. Then, he emptied out all of their spatial tools, and only then did he stop. He obtained a considerable number of great herbs, which were the benefits bestowed by the World Alliance. These heavenly venerates had been saving them up, and in the end, they had all benefited Ling Han. To dare ambush my daughter. You guys are really courting death, Ling Han said menacingly. This was the realm battlefield, and killing was forbidden. If not for that, these people would have long since died. The members of the World Alliance could only groan in pain. There should be no one with 5th-tier battle prowess capable of defeating Ling Han, unless a 6th Tai made a move. However, because the environment here had evolved, even if a 6th tier came, his cultivation level would still be suppressed. He would probably only be delivering himself up to die, and would not be a match for Ling Han at all. Heh, so awe-inspiring, Xian Chihu said coldly. Ling Han, don't you know that private battles are forbidden here? Ling Han turned to look at him, and felt that this so-called greatest prodigy of all eternity was extremely disgusting. Ling Han could not even be bothered to speak nonsense with him. When he had enough strength, he would just directly beat him till the latter burst. The coldness in his expression caused Xian Chihu to fly into a rage, and he immediately stepped out. Ling Han, you dare to look down on me. He moved and pressed out his right palm. Boom. 6th-tier power blazed out. This power was too great. Ling Han could not possibly match it, but before he even retreated, Lin Yulian had already moved and stood in front of him. Her delicate hand waved lightly and dispersed this blow from Xian Chihu. Move aside. Xian Chihu's gaze was menacing. Lin Yulian had tender features, but her expression was extremely determined as she said, Brother Xian, enough is enough. What do you mean by enough is enough? Xian Chihu laughed loudly. His figure shot out and charged towards Ling Han. You've gone too far. Lin Yulian waved a sleeve, stepping forward to meet Xian Chihu's attack. The two greatest prodigies of all eternity began a fierce clash, both unleashing their full battle prowess. Hong, long, long. The heaven and earth trembled. Thankfully, this place had already become the realm battlefield. Ordinary people would have long since evacuated. Otherwise, if they fought like this, who knew how many ordinary people would suffer? Even so, Ling Han and the other elites with 5th-tier battle prowess had no choice but to retreat as well. The aftermath was extremely terrifying, and there was no need for them to face it head-on. After fighting for half a day, Xian Chihu finally stopped. As fellow greatest prodigies of all eternity, Xian Chihu couldn't do anything to Lin Yulian, and Lin Yulian couldn't do anything to him, either. Unless they really fought with their lives on the line, it would be impossible to determine the victor even if they fought for 100 million years. Xian Chihu looked menacingly at Ling Han. He did not hide the killing intent in his eyes at all. Previously, he had kept it hidden and used a decapitation operation to lay a trap for Ling Han, but looking at his present expression, if he had a chance to make a move, he would kill Ling Han without hesitation. Ling Han was fearless as he looked into Xian Chihu's eyes. Worst come to worst, he could just tear a rip into the void and leave. As long as he advanced to the 4th tier, he would be able to completely match Xian Chihu, and if he became a 5th tier, beating up Xian Chihu would definitely be as easy as a father beating his son. There was a ball of anger in Ling Han's heart. Xian Chihu could be so unrestrained, but wasn't it all because he had a higher cultivation level and greater strength? I want to become stronger. I want to become even stronger. Ling Han clenched his fists and shouted in his heart. An incredibly desperate need for strength rose up in him. Everyone gradually left. Because unity had long since crumbled, the rules of the realm battlefield weren't so strict anymore. As long as no one was killed, no one would pursue the matter. Thus, the matter of Ling Han destroying the World Alliance was also set aside in confusion. Actually, there were only a few people and forces that really wanted to pursue the matter with Ling Han. The majority still hoped to see Ling Han mature. Ling Han had only collected some interest this time. He knew that the cause of the trouble lay with Yu Borong, who wanted to avenge the death of his son, and that was why he had deliberately targeted the Ling Alliance. This debt would be remembered. Time passed quietly, and as the environment of the realm battlefield became more and more neutral, Hysteria's army attacked again, setting up camp in the distance, ready to launch a fierce attack at any time. However, because the timing and location were still leaning in favor of the Flaming Frost Realm army, Hysteria's army chose to stay put. Just at this moment, news came again from the Genesis world of the last era. Previously, hadn't there been people who stayed there, wanting to find any raw stones that they had missed? Not too long ago, someone had actually entered into the 10th dimension. Was this a 7th tier? Of course, that was impossible. This was only a 3rd tier, but how had he managed to enter the 10th dimension? As it turned out, a spatial overlap had appeared in this group of dimensions. It was not the kind of compression from top to bottom, but rather like the realm battlefield in the past. When one was walking in the 2nd spatial level, who knew, one might pass through a cave and arrive at the 5th level or the 7th spatial level. That 3rd tier had entered a passageway in the 4th dimension and then discovered that he had come to the 10th dimension, or at least it was the 10th level, because this place had not been excavated before. Ultimately, the reason should be related to the emergence of Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin and the other 7th tiers. They were too strong, which affected the structure of this Genesis world. It was absolutely possible because this Genesis world was already dead, so it naturally couldn't withstand the power of 7th tier. When this news spread out, everyone was naturally moved. When the primitive dimension had appeared, it had greatly increased the overall strength of the Heavenly Venerable tier elites. However, limited by their strength, even 6th tier elites would not be able to set foot from the 10th dimension onwards. And now, a special passageway had actually been discovered. The camp instantly became restless. Who would still be in the mood to sit here? Not long after, a decree came from the 6th tier elites, permitting a portion of Heavenly Venerates to venture into the last era Genesis world for exploration, because this would be able to increase the overall strength of Heavenly Venerable tier. However, the choice of candidates was strictly regulated. A total of over 100 people were chosen and were able to enter into the Genesis world of the last era. Ling Han was also fortunate enough to be given a place. Additionally, supreme prodigies like Xian Chihu, Wu Haoyang, Feng Wuding, and so on were also on the list. However, Lin Yulian was excluded. She would wait for Ling Han and the others to return and take turns with them. Otherwise, if all the powerful figures left, then the Hysteria army would still be unstoppable should they launch an attack, the suppression of heaven and earth notwithstanding. It should be known that there were definitely spies of Hysteria among them, and the truth definitely couldn't be concealed. Among those who had good relations with Ling Han, only Bai Maifin was also included in this batch. The two of them immediately set out, heading towards Genesis world of the last era, which was in the void. They only had 100,000 years, and then they would have to return. Otherwise, they would be dealt with as traitors. Chapter 2932, 2932 I am an ultimate Grandmaster. Chapter 2932, 2932 I am an ultimate Grandmaster. 2932 I am an ultimate Grandmaster. Ling Han brought Bai Maifin and traversed through the void. He was constantly vigilant. The moment he discovered any trace of Hysteria, he would immediately return to the Genesis world. He definitely wouldn't have any thoughts of getting lucky. This time, it was only Ling Han and Bai Maifin. Because there was a strict limit on the number of people, the Empress, Hunyo, and the others had all stayed behind in the realm battlefield. They could not possibly follow him here willfully. Fortunately, Hysteria didn't appear. Although Ling Han was cautious, the two safely and smoothly arrived at the Genesis world of the last era. After learning the truth, Ling Han and Bai Maifin had different feelings when they set foot on this piece of land again. This place had once been glorious and had once represented everything. However, because of Hysteria, it had now become ruins and could only float in the void forever. Say, do you think there's another Genesis world of the era before last? Bai Maifin suddenly asked. Ling Han was surprised. Your imagination is too active, isn't it? That may not be the case. Perhaps Hysteria has originated from an even more ancient era, and even the Genesis world of the last era was just like us. Bai Maifin insisted on this point of view. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. That's true. With how big the void is, there may be the ruins of another Genesis world. If we can find it, then wouldn't we make a fortune? Bai Maifin's eyes lit up. He was a very calm young man, But as he was talking about a Genesis world now, he was naturally excited. Yet Ling Han thought that if his body could also evolve into a Genesis world, then wouldn't he be able to have whatever he wanted? Let's go. He patted Bai Meifin's shoulder. They had to hurry up. They only had 100,000 years. 100,000 years might seem very long, but for heavenly venerates, this was a pitifully short amount of time. They arrived at the 5th dimension and searched for that passageway. This did not take too much time. The two of them were very careful because Xi and Chihu had also come here. He would definitely not let go of Ling Han, and if he had the chance, he would definitely kill him. Ling Han had confiscated a great many great herbs from the World Alliance, but left them for the Empress and the others. This was mostly because he needed too many resources to advance another step further, and this small amount of great herbs was actually not of much use to him. Thus, it would be better to let the Empress and the others have them. Their improvement would be obvious, and they would be able to significantly increase their strength. I'll go check things out and see if there is any ambush, Bai Meifin said. Ling Han was more inclined to believe that if Xi and Chihu had arrived here long ago, he would definitely be clinging to the treasures of the 10th dimension. He should not have wasted time waiting for him here, but it was better to be safe than sorry, so he nodded. Bai Meifin walked over, and he came back after a while and gave Ling Han a gesture, indicating that it was safe. Ling Han and Bai Meifin passed through this passageway. They obviously didn't feel any change in space, but as they walked, the path ahead suddenly became clear they had already appeared in another place. Follow me, Ling Han said. He was a Grandmaster of raw stone, and who could compare to him in the exploration for veins of raw stone? Bai Meifin hurriedly followed. I say, are you also skilled in searching for veins of raw stone? Ha! Don't you know that I'm known as the mine exploration expert? Ling Han joked. I really couldn't tell, Bai Meifin said without fear. This was practically challenging his authority. Then just wait and see. Not only was Ling Han exploring for veins, but he was also looking for a new spatial passageway that could lead to a higher-level dimension. Since a passage had appeared here, perhaps there would be a second, a third, several hundred, or a few thousand. However, their luck was not that good. For the moment, they had not discovered a spatial passageway, though they had discovered a considerable number of veins of ore. With Ling Han mining them precisely, they obtained great herbs every time, which made Bai Meifin exclaim in disbelief. You really are a Grandmaster of raw stone? He asked in surprise. It should be known that the heavenly venerable stone could cut off divine sense, and even heavenly venerates could not use their divine sense to penetrate them. No, I am an ultimate Grandmaster, Ling Han said jokingly. Bai Meifin couldn't help much in mine exploration, so he took the initiative to search for the spatial passageway. Even Ling Han did not have the ability to cheat for that, so he could only work hard and search bit by bit. Furthermore, this was the 10th dimension, which was incredibly dangerous. Occasionally, there would be energy storms that reached the 6th tier surging out of the ground. Thus, whether it was exploring for veins of ore or searching for spatial passageways, one had to be extremely careful, as well as possess mighty strength. Otherwise, if one was not able to react in time, heavenly venerates with battle prowess below the 6th tier would only die. In truth, even elites with battle prowess of the 6th tier would have to be extremely careful. If they were hit by the energy storm, they might not die, but they would definitely be severely injured. If they were trapped by the energy storm, they would also die. Ling Han and Bai Meifin divided the work among themselves. There were even fewer people here, so the competition was naturally even smaller. Ling Han was also a cheat-level Grandmaster of raw stone. It could be imagined just how astonishing his gains were. After a few thousand years, he had gathered over 200 great herbs, and one of them was an orange-colored great herb, which could be helpful in advancing one's cultivation level. Additionally, there were also a dozen heavenly venerable seals, but only one was a 7th grade seal. The others were all 9th or 8th grade, which he had long since obtained. Great herbs aren't bad, either. It can increase my cultivation level, and at this stage, this should be what I need the most. Heavenly venerable seals are only icing on the cake. Ling Han felt that he had already found enough here. It would be best if Bai Meifan returned immediately and told him that he had found the passage to the dimensions even further underground. This had once been a Genesis world. So even if there were countless low-level dimensions that had been completely destroyed in the Great Explosion, there should still at least be around 1,000 dimensions remaining. Right now, they had only explored 10 dimensions. As for the remaining dimensions, there was an astonishingly large number of them. Ling Han left marks as he explored mines, anticipating his meetup with Bai Meifan again. However, it was destined that enemies would meet. On this day, after Ling Han had just found a large vein of and unearthed a few great herbs, he suddenly sensed an aura of life approaching him. Had Bai Meifan returned, Ling Han stopped what he was doing and turned around to look. A person appeared, bearing supreme dominance like an emperor, as if the whole world should obey him. Xian Chihu. Ling Han sighed upon seeing this. Why was it that whoever he didn't want to see would appear? Haha, Ling Han, you have delivered yourself to my doorstep? Xian Chihu was also startled. That was because he had not deliberately been tracking Ling Han and had completely come here by coincidence. However, he did not hesitate in the slightest and immediately charged over. Thoughts sped quickly through Ling Han's mind. Of course, he could tear a rip into the void and return, but if he wanted to come back here again, it would take him a lot of time. He only had a total of 100,000 years and definitely could not waste it on making his way back here. Thus, he turned around and fled. Boom, boom, boom. Xian Chihu pursued rapidly, attacking madly as he did so, wanting to kill Ling Han. Chapter 29:33, 29:33 robbed again. Chapter 29:33, 29:33 robbed again. 29:33 robbed again. Ling Han channeled all the 9th grade seals and exploded with astonishing power for a short period of time. He also released all the dimensional projections in one go. 19 dimensions. Even Xian Chihu was shocked. He didn't expect that the 11 dimensions that he had seen Ling Han previously channel were far from his limit. You actually have 19 dimensions. Then, there's even more reason to kill you, he said with killing intent. Pong, pong, pong. Xian Chihu exploded with power, and under the crushing pressure of 6th-tier battle prowess. So what if there were 19 projections of medium-level dimensions? They could only be destroyed in an instant. However, seizing an opening in this instant, Ling Han had also won himself a sliver of a chance to escape. Heavenly Venerates were hard to kill. What more when Ling Han possessed 5th-tier battle prowess? Shio. He fled, his figure extraordinarily fast. Fuck. Ling Han cursed vehemently. He couldn't tolerate it any longer. He was determined to advance to the 4th tier. I'm going into seclusion. This time, I won't come out unless I reach the 4th tier. He tunneled into the ground. With the heavenly venerable stone hiding his traces, even 6th-tier elites couldn't find him with their divine sense. They would have to dig deep into the ground to find him physically. This should be quite safe. Little Bai, I'm sorry. Ling Han took out a great herb and began to munch madly. Bai Meifan's share was here, but he planned to eat all of it. It couldn't be helped. Though Ling Han was already in the late stage of the 3rd tier and seemed not to be far from the 4th tier, it was really too difficult for him to advance a little further. He needed a great amount of energy, so it was really a question whether these 200+ great herbs would be enough to send him to the peak stage of the 3rd tier. Forget it. Just eat them. Ling Han ate a great herb, and the innumerable powers of dimension in his body vibrated at the same time, automatically channeling. They were like a millstone that was crushing the medicinal effects into endless extremely pure energy, which was then rapidly absorbed. Digesting a great herb actually only took him a day's time. Ling Han was speechless with shock. He was becoming more and more freakish. If it was another 5th tier that was to eat this great herb, he would not be able to digest all of it without a year's time. The energy contained within was too terrifying. Ling Han's advancement through the cultivation levels was slow, but the benefits he received were also incredibly astonishing. Just take the power of dimension, for example. It could disperse and absorb the attacks of enemies. Who else could accomplish this? I'll have another. Crack. Ling Han took out another great herb and began to chew it. Then, it was the third. The fourth. As the number of great herbs decreased rapidly, his cultivation level was also slowly increasing. More than half a year later, there were only 3 great herbs left, and Ling Han's cultivation level was finally close to the peak stage of the 3rd tier. There are only 3 left, and they still can't send me to the peak stage of the 3rd tier. Ling Han frowned. If it was other 5th tiers, this would be enough to deliver them from the early stage of the 5th tier to the peak stage a few times over. However, I only need 10 great herbs to solve the problem. This shouldn't be too difficult to resolve. After Ling Han consumed the remaining 3 great herbs, he went out to search for new veins of ore. However, a few thousand years had already passed, and most of the raw stone veins here had already been mined. It was already difficult to find even a single vein of ore, what more to harvest about 10 great herbs. Ling Han's frown became deeper and deeper, yet he still roamed around in the surroundings. Even if he couldn't find veins of ore, just let him find a spatial passageway to enter a dimension further below. That way, it would definitely be no problem for him to obtain another 10 great herbs. As he was thinking, he suddenly discovered an aura crashing towards him from ahead. Heavenly Venerates would release their auras, but they would limit it within a specific range. The area within this range was equivalent to the Heavenly Venerates' absolute territory. Furthermore, in this dangerous place, this territory was naturally even more important as various bits of information could be fed back to the Heavenly Venerate in the nick of time, so they could avoid danger in advance. Ling Han naturally had also released his own aura. He had crashed into the other's aura, and the other person had also crashed into his. Both of them were shocked, and then discovered that the other party was extremely strong, not inferior to themselves at all. Then, in the next instant, they saw each other. Fengwuding. How coincidental. Was this the so-called "it was destined that enemies would meet"? Ling Han let out a battle cry and laughed. Without another word, he immediately rushed up and began fighting. Ling Han, Fengwuding only had time to roar in fury before he had no choice but to counterattack. He knew how powerful Ling Han was, and there was no third person here. Even if he was killed, no one would be able to find out that it was Ling Han. He counterattacked with all his might, directly channeling his full power. He was the son of destiny of the Genesis world from the last generation, and would become the only sovereign in the world in future. It was extremely possible that he would surpass the 7th tier, so how could he die here? Pong, pong, pong. However, what greeted him was Ling Han's iron fist. He was boosted by 8th grade seals, and though only half was used, they could increase his power by as many as 500 times. This was something that Fengwuding could not match, no matter what secret technique he used. Fengwuding was beaten up, and he was extremely depressed. Just think, he was the son of destiny of the Genesis world from the last generation, but why had he encountered Ling Han? The latter had shattered all of his confidence to bits. Ling Han's eyes were cold. He did not care what kind of prodigy Fengwuding was. Fengwuding was in the World Alliance, and the World Alliance had severely wounded his daughter and son-in-law. This debt had to be paid back in double. He had no enmity with Fengwuding, but who asked Fengwuding to join the World Alliance? But just as Ling Han was about to deliver a fatal strike, he sensed another aura, which was incredibly powerful. The third person soon appeared. It was Wu Haoyang. A thought immediately flashed through Ling Han's mind. Should he kill him or not? If he killed him, then unless he killed Wu Haoyang to keep him quiet, Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin and the other 7th tier elites would probably abandon everything else and ignore hysteria to seek Ling Han out for an accounting when they found out. By then, it would probably be very difficult to save him even with Lin Luo interfering. The problem was that, firstly, Ling Han could not kill Wu Haoyang to keep him quiet, and secondly, there was no reason for him to kill an innocent person, either. Forget it. He immediately made his decision, but it was one thing not to kill him. He still threw a punch, beating Fengwuding to the point that he lost all ability to resist. Then, he searched out the spatial tool that he possessed. With a sweep of his divine sense, Ling Han couldn't help but look pleased. There were actually 14 great herbs inside, and they were all yellow-colored great herbs. Thanks. Ling Han laughed loudly and casually tossed Feng Wooding onto the ground. Then, he nodded at Wu Haoyang, turned, and left. Wu Haoyang did not stop him. This was not the realm battlefield, so how could there be so many rules? As long as Ling Han did not kill anyone, it would be fine. But now, all these great herbs had actually benefited his rival. How could Feng Wooding not be fuming with anger? Ah, he roared in fury. Chapter 2934, 2934 Breaking Through to 4th Tier. Chapter 2934, 2934 Breaking Through to 4th Tier. 2934 Breaking Through to 4th Tier. It would be best to keep this kind of wealth-delivering boy alive. Ling Han nodded. Killing Feng Wooding would not be enough to vent his hatred. His target was Yu Borong. Then let's decide on this happily. Ling Han found another safe place and began to consume great herbs. 10 days passed, and he had also digested 10 great herbs, but he was still a sliver away from the peak stage of the 3rd tier. Fortunately, the wealth-sending boy is generous enough. There are still 4 great herbs left, Ling Han mumbled to himself, and began chewing on great herbs again. 1 wasn't enough, and 2 were also a bit lacking. It was only right when he devoured the 3rd great herb that Ling Han finally reached the peak stage of the 3rd tier. I should spend some time tempering my foundations. However, there are endless powers of dimension in my body, which is equivalent to a millstone that has already tempered my power to an incredibly pure level. Moreover, I don't have any more time. I will immediately begin breaking through to the 4th tier. Ling Han channeled all the heavenly venerable seals. In the first place, this was a means to communicate with fundamental particles. With more than 200 seals channeling at the same time, his spirit expanded endlessly to sense the 3rd fundamental power of the heaven and earth. Previously, he had spent several 100 million years to achieve this, but now he could not afford that much time. I have to sense the 3rd fundamental particle as quickly as possible. Ling Han took out that orange-colored great herb, thought for a while, and then immediately began to chew on it. He believed that he would be able to break through to the 4th tier without relying on this kind of great herb, but this could possibly take 1 to 2 billion years. He did not have that much time to waste now. Weren't great herbs saved up for the purpose of consumption? In just a few bites, this great herb had completely entered Ling Han's stomach. Not long after, a great many particles appeared in his mind, as many as the stars in the sky. Although there were countless of them, they could still be categorized. There were a total of 6 types, and the 2 types of power in Ling Han's body immediately resonated with 2 types of starlight particles, causing the light emitted by these particles to become even more dazzling. These were the fundamental particles, Ling Han thought. No wonder the orange-colored great herb could help heavenly venerates advance their cultivation level. This was equivalent to materializing the fundamental particles. However, the moment his divine sense touched them, those starlight particles immediately dimmed and rapidly disappeared. Ling Han tensed. Even if he had ingested a great herb, it did not mean that he would definitely be able to break through. It could only offer him some help. He calmed down and no longer touched them blindly. Instead, he only targeted one particular type. The fundamental particles repelled each other. If he was greedy and wanted to master all the fundamental particles in one go, the result would only be that he would not be able to get anything. He targeted a single type of particle and continued to touch it, increasing his sensitivity to this kind of particle. The effects of the great herb were very short-term, and after merely half a day, his mind dimmed, and he could no longer sense the slightest bit of it. Ling Han did not feel the slightest bit of regret. He once again released his divine sense, which enshrouded his surroundings. The mark of the 3rd fundamental particle had already been left in his mind. Now, he only had to communicate with the actual fundamental particle through this mark. Time slowly crept by. 10 days, 100 days over 7,000 years later, Ling Han's divine sense suddenly trembled. Joy instantly spread across his face. He had finally communicated with the third fundamental particle. Come. Over 200 heavenly venerable seals lit up at the same time, continuously absorbing such particles into his body, increasing Ling Han's power. This was the mesotron particle. Ling Han suppressed the need for energy and the powers of dimension in his body, and focused on extracting these particles to increase his power, temper his physique, and stabilize his cultivation level. Everything else could be done slowly. He could not rush things. 100,000 years was too short. In the void, 3 figures were presently rapidly flying past. Upon a closer look, each of them was strange-looking. They were either multi-armed, multi-legged, multi-headed, or multi-eyed. These were Hysteria's creations. These 3 monsters all exuded a violent aura. They were incredibly strong, but their eyes were filled with the brilliance of intelligence. They were definitely not something that those monsters that only knew slaughter could compare to. They arrived at the Genesis world of the last era. They descended, and as their eyes swept over the surroundings, a change took place in their bodies. They became human, and their aura similarly changed. They became no different from normal humans. They walked slowly, searching for clues. These were 3 6th-tier monsters, and their mission was very simple, and that was to kill 2 people. One of them was Ling Han, while the other was Feng Wuding. After spending another 30,000 years, Ling Han had finally stabilized his cultivation as a 4th tier. I still have a lot of room for improvement, he said to himself. The maximum number of dimensions that he could develop in his body had suddenly increased to as many as 137. Furthermore, the upper limit in quality of these dimensions was also close to a high-level dimension now. Additionally, the powers of dimension could also be improved now. However, the time needed for this would be much, much too long. Even if he was given 1 billion years, that would probably be just barely enough time. Right now, he couldn't care less. His priority was mine exploration and unearthing raw stones. After his cultivation level had increased, Ling Han's luck suddenly seemed to have improved. Not many days later, he discovered a spatial passageway. He was already fearless now. Even if he encountered Xian Chihu again, he was confident that he could put up a fight now. After entering the passageway, space overlapped and changed. After half a day, Ling Han finally entered the ruins of another dimension. He was definitely not the first person to come here, but this was not one of the first 10 dimensions, because the traces of veins of, or being mined were still very new. Boom! An energy storm surged out violently 30 meters in front of Ling Han. Ling Han's heroic spirit soared, and he threw a punch at the energy storm. Pung! The power of the punch surged, and a hole was actually punched open in the energy storm. This hole did not close up even after a long time had passed. Only after the force of Ling Han's punch completely dissipated did the hole in the energy storm begin to close, and rapidly disappeared. My battle prowess should barely be on the level of the 6th tier. Ling Han had gained a more direct understanding. I can only be ranked among the weakest 6th tiers. It couldn't be helped. He hadn't cultivated to the pinnacle of this cultivation level, so he could only be regarded as a weak 6th tier with battle prowess like this. However, no matter how weak he was still a 6th tier elite. He was still overwhelmingly impressive. If I advance another step further, I will be able to possess the battle prowess of a 7th tier elite. Ling Han's eyes lit up. If he reached the 7th tier, he would no longer need to worry about the energy storm here or the super flames formed by the fundamental particles, and could mine the treasures from the Genesis world of the last era completely. At that time, his cultivation level would definitely soar, allowing him to charge into the 7th tier even in terms of cultivation level. Then, his battle prowess would reach an unimaginable level of strength. I wonder where that by Myfin went? Ling Han mumbled to himself. Forget it. I'll just harvest some great herbs first and give that brat a portion as compensation. He began to explore the mines. Though he had come here very late, with his incomparable ability of exploration and mining, he had already harvested another 20-odd great herbs and 3 heavenly venerable seals in a mere century. He had just found a new vein of ore and had not yet begun to explore it, but then he looked like he was listening attentively. There was the sound of battle. Fighting here was naturally a very normal thing. At first, Ling Han did not take it to heart, but as the shock waves from the battle became more and more intense, he managed to sense a familiar aura. By Myfin. He was fighting with someone? Ling Han immediately dashed toward the location of the battle. His lackey was in trouble, so how could he stand by and watch as the boss? It was only a matter of a few steps, and he was already close to the area where the battle was taking place. He saw that Bai Myfin was indeed fighting fiercely with someone, and his opponent was shockingly Feng Wuding. Chapter 2935, 2935 Crushed. Chapter 2935, 2935 Crushed. 2935 Crushed. Ling Han really felt like complaining. Why was it Feng Wuding again? Was he really going to become his wealth-delivering boy? I'll ask you for the last time. Where is Ling Han? Feng Wuding shouted loudly. His voice was extremely harsh and filled with oppressiveness. He was completely suppressing Bai Myfin, showing strength that surpassed the latter by not only just a little bit, because he had already advanced to the 4th tier. Feng Wuding, as a 4th tier, had abilities that had directly soared to the peak stage of the 5th tier, and he was presently only in the early stage of the 4th tier. He was sure that by the time he reached the middle stage of the 4th tier, or at most the late stage, his battle prowess would be able to leap into the 6th tier. The Son of Destiny was indeed extraordinary. Although Bai Myfin was incredibly freakish, compared with Feng Wuding, he was not just a little bit weaker. His battle prowess was also close to peak stage 5th tier, but while they were both at the peak stage of the 5th tier, there was still a difference. Moreover, when it came to heavenly venerable seals, there was also a huge gap between the two of them. Thus, Bai Myfin was at a complete disadvantage, vomiting blood continuously from the barrage. Haha, I don't know Ling Han like the back of my hand, so how would I know? Though Bai Myfin was outmatched, his expression was still very carefree. He was completely unconcerned and fought with all his might. Would Feng Wuding dare to kill him? Just like how no one dared to kill Feng Wuding, no one dared to kill Bai Myfin either, unless they could destroy him so completely that no secrets would be leaked at all. Who in this world would be able to escape the pursuit of a vengeful 7th tier elite? However, though Feng Wuding didn't dare to kill Bai Myfin, he was completely capable of severely wounding and ruthlessly humiliating him. This was a grudge between juniors. What more when it was a battle of equal cultivation levels? So even if Bai Fan found out, how could he bring himself to seek out Feng Wuding? Even if he disregarded his pride, how could Heavenly venerate Chong Yin and the others be easily trifled with? Bai Myfin used all his powerful moves, yet he was outmatched. He could only fight and flee at the same time. What do you mean by the greatest prodigy of all eternity? You're nothing but trash. Feng Wuding smirked coldly. He had suffered greatly at Ling Han's hands, but within the same cultivation level, only Ling Han could suppress him. Faced with any other prodigy, he was completely at the upper hand. Don't forget, you were almost pummeled into idiocy by my brother, Bai Myfin mocked. Feng Wuding's expression immediately turned dark. The greatest humiliation he had endured in this life came from Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head. In the past, Bai Myfin was such a nice person, filled with sunshine, but now, he had actually learned to speak toxic words. Who knew who it was that had led him astray? If the Empress and the others were present, they would definitely point at his nose and say, "It's you, it's you." Bai Myfin was fleeing, but Feng Wuding wasn't the only one here. There were also 2 other 5th-tier elites from the World Alliance, and they both moved to block him. These 2 5th tiers were not stronger than Bai Myfin, but they didn't need to defeat him. They only needed to block him for a while so that Feng Wuding would catch up to him. Humph, if Ling Han dares to appear again, I will definitely teach him a lesson, Feng Wuding said coldly. He was now a 4th tier, and his ability could not be compared to when he was a 3rd tier. He would definitely sweep aside all others who had 5th tier battle prowess. Oh, how do you plan to teach me? Ling Han said with a smile. With a step, he had already appeared beside Bai Myfin. When they saw Ling Han, The two fifth tiers from the World Alliance couldn't help but feel shocked. They actually didn't dare to make a move. Their psychological trauma was too great. Previously, Ling Han had single-handedly wiped the floor with all 9 great fifth-tier elites of the World Alliance. Now, there were only 2 of them, so how were they supposed to stop Ling Han? Ling Han, by Myfin, was startled. He had not thought that Ling Han would actually appear at such a crucial time. Ling Han, Feng Wuding said through gritted teeth. He was filled with hatred. Ling Han was unconcerned. We haven't seen each other for such a long time, and you have already advanced to the 4th tier. Looks like you have obtained quite a number of great herbs. Even if Feng Wuding's cultivation speed was astonishing, it was still impossible for him to advance to the 4th tier in just a few thousand years. He had to have obtained a considerable number of great herbs. At the mention of great herbs, Feng Wuding's expression darkened even further. He had already been robbed twice by Ling Han and was presently filled with anger. Ling Han, today, I will show you what the Son of Destiny means, he roared in fury and charged over. Ling Han casually threw out a punch, appearing to be at ease. You have advanced into 4th tier, so how could it be that I have not? The slower his progress was, the more explosive his burst of power would be when he actually broke through. Pong! It was only a single punch, and Feng Wuding was sent flying, throwing up blood continuously. S6th tier battle prowess. Feng Wuding's face was as white as a sheet. He had 5th tier battle prowess, but even if he was at the peak stage of the 5th tier, so what? Faced with 6th tier battle prowess, he would only be bleeding and battered. His expression was filled with disbelief as his pride had suffered a lot of damage. Wasn't that so? He thought of himself as extraordinary. He was the Son of Destiny. However, he was also in the early stage of the 4th tier, and his battle prowess was only at the peak stage of the 5th tier. Though he could defeat all those with 5th tier battle prowess, he was still very far from reaching the 6th tier. However, Ling Han had reached the 6th tier in terms of actual battle prowess. With such a comparison, wasn't the gap between the two of them clear at a single glance? However, Feng Wuding couldn't accept this. It was one thing for him to be suppressed by Ling Han when he had been in the 3rd tier, but now he was already in the 4th tier. The higher the cultivation level, the greater his advantage as the Son of Destiny should be. On the contrary, Ling Han had now left him far behind. Could it be that his title as the Son of Destiny was just an empty label? Feng Wuding's pride couldn't accept such a result, but no matter how freakish he was, no matter how he used powerful moves, 5th tier battle prowess couldn't possibly reach the 6th tier. The gap was as wide as the sky. Just like how Ling Han was strong enough, right? But when he was in 3rd tier, he could not advance his battle prowess to the 6th tier no matter how hard he tried. Feng Wuding could only be thrashed, and he was very soon battered and bloody, looking just like Bai Myfin. Good fight. Bai Myfin clapped, and at the same time, he was also filled with shock. Ling Han's battle prowess was already at the 6th tier, and he was only one step away from reaching the 7th tier. At that time, he would really be standing at the apex, and would no longer be subject to any restrictions. Ling Han only thrashed Feng Wuding, and did not intend to kill him. Though there was great enmity between him and the World Alliance, Feng Wuding himself actually had not done any evil. It was just very coincidental and very unlucky that he had joined the World Alliance. Moreover, Feng Wuding was his wealth-delivering boy. This guy had received priority nurturing from the World Alliance and had a lot of treasures on him. Ling Han should be shearing him in waves like wool, but he could not bear to kill him. Just as he was fighting to his heart's content, Ling Han suddenly felt 3 terrifying auras sweep towards him. 6th tier, 6th tier, 6th tier. As he was startled, the 3 auras had already approached, and 3 people appeared. He didn't recognize any of them, and they were all extremely unfamiliar to him. There were a total of around 100 6th tier elites in the Genesis world, and Ling Han had seen over half of them before. Thus, it was normal that he didn't recognize the 3 people in front of him. However, these 3 6th tier heavenly venerates gave him a strange feeling. However, He couldn't put his finger on what was off for the moment. The eyes of these 3 6th-tier elites swept over them and immediately locked onto Ling Han. 2 5th-tiers of the World Alliance hurriedly asked for help from these 3 6th-tiers. Seniors, please lend a hand to save Feng Wooding. He is the one that the 7th-tiers. Chapter 2936, 2,936 Hunters. Chapter 2936, 2,936 Hunters. 2,936 Hunters. Pu. However, before the 2 5th-tiers could finish speaking, one of the 6th-tiers had already moved. With a single strike, the two of them were vomiting blood, severely wounded. And this was still because they were at the 5th tier. If they were at the 4th tier, they would definitely be killed with a single strike. Ling Han, Bai Meifan, and Feng Wooding were all shocked. What did these 3 people mean by their actions? Seniors. The 2 5th-tiers coughed up blood, their eyes filled with confusion. Why had they suddenly suffered such an attack? Ling Han's heart shuddered, and realization suddenly dawned on him. He said to Bai Meifan, "Leave first." Bai Meifan looked towards him, his expression filled with confusion. He was the descendant of a 7th tier. Although the 3 people on the other side were 6th tiers, did they dare to make a move on him? It should be known that he had the means left behind by a 7th tier. Once he died, Bai Fan would immediately know everything. The higher the cultivation level, the clearer one would be about how terrifying a 7th tier was. Even these 3 people wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Idiot, they are Hysteria's subordinates, Ling Han shouted. He finally discovered what was off about these 3 people. That was because they were the creations of Hysteria, so there was an incredibly strange component in their auras. What? Only now did Bai Meifan get a great shock. If these 3 people were Hysteria's creations, then he wouldn't have to worry about them not attacking him at all. In any case, they were already mortal enemies. To say nothing of killing a descendant of a 7th tier, even if they killed the descendants of all the 7th tiers. So what? What about you? He asked Ling Han. I will fight them. Ling Han was filled with fighting spirit. All right. Bai Meifan made the decision, turned, and ran. He ran, but the 3 6th tiers did not give chase. They merely stared at Ling Han and Feng Wooding, and their aura gradually changed. What was originally only a bit of a cold aura completely spread out now, exuding endless evil. At the same time, their forms also changed. One sprouted a few more arms, another grew out more legs, and the last had 7 heads. Hysteria's creations had many unique traits. The difference was that their eyes were exuding the luster of intelligence. This was understandable. If they hadn't possessed such intelligence, they wouldn't have been able to find this place at all. They would have long since been lost in the void. After such a long time, Hysteria finally made its move. Ling Han was filled with lofty aspirations. He had just advanced to the 4th tier and wanted to test out his own battle prowess. With a shake of Ling Han's right hand, Feng Wooding was knocked unconscious so that this guy would not cause trouble for him in battle. Ling Han smiled faintly. Are you here to kill me, or him? Feng Wooding was the person who had been chosen by the Genesis world of the last era. Perhaps Hysteria would also feel wary. Who knew what secrets this guy was hiding in his body? It was possible that they would only be unleashed when he reached the 5th tier, 6th tier, or even the 7th tier, eventually posing a threat to Hysteria. You both have to die. A 6th tier monster spoke up, its voice dry, as if it had just learned to speak. Ling Han pondered for a moment before shaking his head and saying, Normally, I wouldn't care at all whether this person lives or dies. However, if Hysteria wants to kill him, I want to save him. He shrunk Feng Wooding's body with his powerful abilities, transforming it into a tiny that he casually stored away. Come on then. Ling Han crooked a finger at the 3 6th-tier monsters. The 3 monsters immediately charged over. Boom. Frightening battle prowess surged, rumbling out towards Ling Han. They were very strong, all of them peak stage 6th tiers. He was sure that Hysteria had to have paid a great price to create these 3 monsters. This attack was at peak stage 6th tier, so it was obvious that they wanted to succeed with the first strike. Ling Han shook his head. If he had encountered these three monsters when he had still been at the third tier, he would definitely have been outmatched. He could only have immediately torn a rip into the void and returned afterwards. Otherwise, staying for an extra instant could have possibly spelled death for him. As for now, he was confident that he could put up a fight. Boom! He channeled all the 8th grade seals, and his battle prowess instantly soared madly. He let out a battle cry and brandished fists of fury to meet the incoming attack. Pong! Ling Han exchanged a blow with the three monsters, and his body suddenly shook. He felt blood rush upwards in his body, which made him feel very terrible. In a battle of 1 against 3, Ling Han still enjoyed the upper hand. This was natural because these three monsters had not channeled heavenly venerable seals, and Ling Han had directly closed the gap of 1,000 times between the power of both sides. He would not lose even if it was 1 against 3. However, the three monsters immediately made a comeback. A heavenly venerable seal lit up on each of them, instantly increasing their battle prowess by more than 70 times. 2nd grade seals. Thankfully, every monster only channeled a 2nd grade seal. If they were also using combination seals, then Ling Han would really be having a headache. He would not be qualified to resist at all. Boom! They exchanged blows again. This time, it was Ling Han's turn to be outmatched. The three great 6th tiers had boosted themselves with 2nd grade seals, and their battle prowess had increased explosively by more than 70 times. They had once again gained the upper hand in terms of power, and it was a crushing advantage at that. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and the 19-dimensional projections were unleashed together, suppressing the three 6th tiers. However, it was utterly useless. The 6th tier was too strong, and the dimensions inside Ling Han's body hadn't caught up to his cultivation level yet. They were only medium-level dimensions, so how could they suppress a 6th tier? Pong! Merely being shaken by the aura of 6th tier, these dimensional projections were all turned into pieces. Ling Han sighed internally. If he had let out a real dimension, it could still just barely withstand a few blows. However, if it was a dimensional projection, the gap would be too great and would have no effect at all. As he fought, he continued to retreat. This was a battle of 1 against 3, and they were all peak stage 6th tiers at that. It would be strange if he really won. The three 6th tiers pursued him closely. They only had one thought in mind, and that was to kill. No matter where Ling Han fled, they would persist and not give up. No matter who stood in their way, they would kill them without mercy. Ling Han was very calm. At present, he also had 6th tier battle prowess. If he wanted to kill someone at the same cultivation level as him, it would be as difficult as ascending the heavens. He had no intention to fight to the death without retreating. However, a peak stage 6th tier was indeed powerful. No matter how Ling Han switched directions, they would always be able to firmly cling onto him. No matter what he tried, Ling Han would not be able to shake them off. Time flew by as one side fled and the other side pursued. Before long, 300 years had already passed. Ling Han continued to use the energy storms here to delay them, and even caused these three 6th tiers to suffer a little. However, they ignored it completely and continued to pursue him closely. Dregs of hysteria, take this! A loud battle cry rang out, and two figures charged over at the same time. Xian Chihu and Wu Haoyang. It was clear that the two greatest prodigies of all eternity had obtained great fortune here. Their cultivation level had already reached the peak stage of the 5th tier. However, this was the real difficulty. Just think, they had all been stuck at the 4th tier for an epoch before finally advancing to the 5th tier. It could be imagined that without a Crimson Great Herb, they might have to take 2, 3, or even more epochs to advance to the 6th tier. However, with the cultivation level of peak stage 5th tier, added with their freakishness, the strength of their battle prowess was definitely terrifying. They charged over from the sidelines, and just happened to intercept those three 6th tier monsters. The two sides immediately came to blows, and the battle was incredibly intense. Chapter 2937, 2937 Fighting Side by Side. Chapter 2937, 2937 37 fighting side by side. 29, 37 fighting side by side. Xi and Chihu and Wu Haoyang appeared in time and intercepted the 3 6th-tier monsters. Ling Han was surprised. Xi and Chihu would actually move to help him? This guy was intent on killing Ling Han, and it was already very kind of him not to take advantage of the opportunity to hit him when he was down, but to actually help. Has the sun risen from the west? But Xi and Chihu had indeed joined forces with Wu Haoyang and was battling extremely intensely with the 3 great 6th-tier monsters. That was definitely not an act. Ling Han could only say that in terms of the big picture, prodigies were impeccable, just like Xiao Yingxiong of the world's paramount martial academy. Faced with the surviving dregs of Hysteria's troops, he unhesitatingly left the hope of survival to Ling Han. Now that they were facing a great enemy, Xi and Chihu did not think too much about it and directly charged forward. However, though Xi and Chihu and Wu Haoyang were the greatest prodigies of all eternity, they were only at the peak stage of the 5th tier. After all, their battle prowess was close to the peak stage of the 6th tier, and they were actually no match for those 3 monsters in terms of power. Thankfully, they all possessed first-grade seals, and Xi and Chihu, for example, possessed a set of first-grade combination seals. Once they were channeled, his battle prowess would completely crush his opponent. If this were the realm battlefield, then with Xi and Chihu showing his might, his opponent would definitely be killed. However, these 3 monsters had intelligence. They clearly knew that Xi and Chihu's power was already overwhelming, so how could they possibly face him head-on? They separated, choosing not to exchange blows with Xi and Chihu. In just 2 hours, Xi and Chihu's boosted power would be reduced to its original state. Xi and Chihu naturally would not waste his own power for nothing. Since the enemy did not fight him head-on, he immediately stopped channeling the first-grade combination seals, and the battle instantly fell into a stalemate. Ling Han let out a battle cry and charged back. He, too, had 6th-tier battle prowess after all, so he couldn't just sit by and watch. The 3 great prodigies teamed up against 3 peak stage 6th-tier monsters. No matter how much Xi and Chihu restrained himself from using the first-grade combination seals, once he used them, he would lose one more chance to use them. After battling for 3 days, the energy release of his set of first-grade combination seals had been completely depleted. Instantly, the 3 monsters no longer had any reservations and began a mad barrage of attacks. Xi and Chihu and Wu Haoyang had each mastered a first-grade seal. This would surpass the second-grade seals that the 3 monsters used, but their original power was insufficient, and those could only compensate for the power gap between the 2 sides and could not give them a crushing advantage. The problem was that there were 3 monsters, and Ling Han was the weak link. His 8th-grade combination seals had already finished releasing energy, and though the 9th-grade combination seals could also increase his power by more than 200 times, it was still unable to close the gap in power between the 2 sides. The 3 great prodigies fell into a dilemma, but since they could become the greatest prodigies of all eternity, which of them did not have a tenacious will? So what if they were at a disadvantage, or even in a difficult situation? As long as there was a sliver of a chance, they would fight to the end. The 3 of them joined forces. It was clear that there had been no previous cooperation, but in practically the blink of an eye, they had formed a tacit understanding. They cooperated with each other, producing an effect of 1 + 1 that was greater than 3. On the other hand, the 3 6th-tier monsters didn't have such excellent coordination. They all attacked on their own, their attacks random. It looked like though Hysteria had bestowed intelligence on them, it had to have held something back. Otherwise, they were already 6th tiers, so how could they not know how to cooperate at all? And it was precisely this that allowed the 3 great prodigies to hold up in the battle. After battling for more than half a month, all their heavenly venerable seals had been used up. They were clearly at an absolute disadvantage, yet defended extremely tenaciously. In fact, it could even be said that they were indomitable. By the looks of it, they could still continue battling. Another month, or even 1 or 2 years wouldn't be a problem. Ha ha ha. The 3 great prodigies all laughed loudly. Though their bodies were covered with injuries, their fighting spirit was still incredibly high. After battling for another 3 months, other elites finally arrived. These were 2 6th-tier elites from the Flaming Frost Realm. Evil creatures, die. The 2 great heavenly venerates immediately charged over. They weren't peak stage 6th tiers, but they still had 6th-tier battle prowess, and they were also a fresh force. Instantly, the disadvantage of Ling Han's side was reversed, but it was only a slight reversal. To say nothing of gaining an advantage, it couldn't even be considered a draw. However, another few days later, a second wave of 6th-tier elites arrived. In this manner, the 2 sides finally fought to a tie. The 3 Hysteria's creations communicated with their divine sense. Let's go. They reached a consensus and immediately retreated. Xi and Chihu and the others did not pursue. Firstly, they could not catch up, and secondly, so what if they did? Would they be able to win? The surviving dregs of Hysteria's troops actually dare to chase us all the way here. What audacity! A 6th-tier elite said. He was a little curious, but also a little angry. These Hysteria's creations didn't take them seriously at all. All of you, be careful. We will go and contact the other 6th tiers and besiege these 3 evil creatures together, another 6th tier said. The 6th tier elites all left, and very soon only Ling Han, Xi and Chihu, and Wu Haoyang were left. It is truly fun to fight side by side with the 2 of you. Wu Haoyang laughed loudly. Ling Han also smiled. He glanced at Xi and Chihu. After they had fought side by side, he had a more positive view of this guy now. Humph! Yet Xi and Chihu's expression was cold. He met Ling Han's gaze. Don't think that I will let you go just because you have fought side by side with me. Same to you, Ling Han said in reply. Remember to clean your neck as well. Sooner or later, I'll chop off your head. Then I'll kill you now. Xi and Chihu said balefully. Initially, on the basis of the battle just now, I wanted to spare you, but you insist on seeking death. Come on then. Ling Han crooked a finger, not afraid in the slightest. As a 6th tier as well, even if he was outmatched, it did not mean that he could not put up a fight. I'll oblige you. Xi and Chihu was just about to attack, yet he was stopped by Wu Haoyang. With him there really wouldn't be a fight. All right, listen to me. Ling Han, you head west. Xi and Chihu, you go east. He became the mediator, which also caused his expression to become very strange. Someone like him only had battle in his eyes, and now he was actually stopping others from starting a battle, which was a little awkward. Humph! Ling Han and Xi and Chihu exchanged a glance before turning around to leave. One headed east, while the other headed west. It was as if they were determined to never see each other again. That's right. Ling Han clapped his hands and threw out Feng Wooding. After making him return to his original form, he first snatched away the spatial tool that Feng Wooding had on him, and then tossed him over to Wu Haoyang. As Wu Haoyang and Xi and Chihu watched, the corners of their mouths twitched slightly. Ling Han robbed Feng Wooding right in front of their eyes, and this was not the first time either. You keep bullying the same guy. Is that really good? Feng Wooding was also slowly waking up and just happened to witness this scene. He couldn't help but throw up blood in fury. That was the accumulation of the World Alliance over innumerable years, and it had once again benefited Ling Han. Ling Han, you just wait. I will definitely kill you. He shouted loudly, his face filled with despondence. Since the heavens already gave birth to him, Feng Wooding, why did the heavens give birth to Ling Han? In practical terms, not officially, of course. Chapter 2938, 2938, Stand Firm. Chapter 2938, 2938, Stand Firm. 2938, Stand Firm. Ling Han. Before Ling Han had left too long, he saw Bai Meifan running towards him. It's good that you're fine. He patted his chest. How was it? Did Xi and Chihu save you? Ling Han was surprised. You asked Xi and Chihu for help? I first encountered Xi and Chihu and told him about the situation. Could it be that he didn't go and save you? Bai Meifan was startled. Ling Han shook his head. He came, and so did Wu Haoyang. That's good. Bai Meifan nodded. Ling Han was really quite surprised. He had not expected that Xian Chihu would actually step out to save him, which taught him a good lesson. In a different situation, if Xian Chihu was the one being hunted down by Hysteria's army, would he help? Ling Han pondered for a moment before nodding slowly. No matter how great the conflict between him and Xian Chihu was, it was still an internal problem. No matter who won or lost, it would not have any adverse effects on the Flaming Frost Realm. However, no matter what the Hysteria army did, as long as they succeeded, they would definitely hurt the Flaming Frost Realm. Internal strife was one matter, but there had to be a bottom line. All right, Ling Han would accept this favor. If Xian Chihu were to fall into a siege of Hysteria's army in the future, he would save him. Come, let's continue digging for stones. The two of them walked around, looking for veins of ore and digging raw stones, and their yield was very bountiful. 100,000 years passed quickly, and it was time for the two of them to return. They set out on the path of return, and after asking around, they found out that the 3/6 tiers of Hysteria troops had not been discovered all this while. Who knew what corner they had hidden themselves in? These creatures had not been killed, and would still be a hidden danger. Who knew where they would suddenly appear from and deliver a fatal strike? They traveled through the void, and only a dozen over years later, the two of them returned to the realm battlefield. Next, they would be switching with a different batch of people who would be going off to explore the Genesis world of the last era. The Rain Emperor and Ji Wuming were both in this batch, but the Empress and Hu Niu would have to wait. Lin Yulian had also left, which also meant that there was no one here to protect Ling Han. Xian Chihu could do as he liked. However, it was useless even if Lin Yulian did not leave. Xian Chihu had obtained great benefits in the Genesis world of the last era, and his strength had directly soared to peak stage 6th tier, already surpassing hers. Ling Han, on the other hand, was unconcerned. His battle prowess had already soared to the 6th tier. In this place where cultivation level was suppressed, he was completely capable of charging in and out of Hysteria's army. Of course, he could not withstand the combined attacks of tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of 5th tiers either. Aside from the undying and indestructible 7th tier, even a 6th tier would be crushed into dust. Right now, Ling Han no longer had to worry about encountering Hysteria in the void, either. With 6th tier battle prowess, even Hysteria's Doppelganger wouldn't be able to kill him. At most, Hysteria's Doppelganger would only be able to wound him slightly. Since that was the case, Ling Han also gladly obeyed the command and dived into Hysteria's base for a round of killing. Killing these monsters couldn't provide life essence, but the power of dimension in Ling Han's body was like a millstone. While dispersing these attacks, it could also transform a portion of the attacking power into his nutrition. It should be known that the hardest thing about improving Ling Han's cultivation level was the growth of these infinite powers of dimension inside his body. Now, these dimension seeds could absorb their own nutrients. This naturally made Ling Han happy. He distributed the great herbs and heavenly venerable seals that he had obtained from the Genesis world of the last era among the Empress and the others. Of course, there was also a share for Bai Maifin. Before this area became completely neutral, Hysteria's army obviously wouldn't attack. This was also a rare opportunity for them to improve their strength. Aside from battling, Ling Han also continued to cultivate in seclusion. Although there were fewer and fewer heavenly venerable seals that he could obtain from the Genesis world of the last era, it still allowed the number of seals he had mastered to reach as many as 300. When he channeled them together, his cultivation speed increased by close to 2,000 times. There was no need to concern himself with the power of dimension in his body, so Ling Han's cultivation progress naturally increased. He had hopes of reaching the peak stage of the 4th tier in 200 million to 300 million years. Meanwhile, the seeds that had already evolved into dimensions in his body were also rapidly growing. 100,000 years later, the second batch of people returned, and the third batch set out. The Empress and Hu Niu were both included in this batch. Ling Han reminded the two women to be careful, while he continued to battle at Hysteria's base to improve his power of dimension. Merely after 700,000 years, The dimensions inside Ling Han's body had completely caught up with his cultivation level. He was still in the early stage of the 4th tier. If there had been a gap of 100 steps between the early stage of the 4th tier and the middle stage, he would have taken about 2 steps by now. However, even though he had only just achieved minimal progress, it increased the upper limit of the number of dimensions he could accommodate to as many as 200. By now, these dimensions had all reached medium level and were close to high level. If they were released all at once, even only as projections, they would be extremely shocking. The Empress and Hun Yo had long since returned, and after 1,000,000 years, it was finally Ling Han's turn to go to the Genesis world of the last era again. But before they could set out, they had no choice but to postpone their plans. That was because Hysteria's army had finally launched an attack. A boundless army charged over, and those densely packed numbers caused one's scalp to go numb with terror. Yet Ling Han was not concerned at all. He took the initiative to charge out and released 20-dimensional projections in a single stroke. Now, these dimensions were all close to high level, and even 5th tiers would be affected slightly, while 4th tiers would be directly smashed to the ground. Ling Han shot out a punch, and over 1,000 Hysteria troops were instantly crushed and killed. Seeing that he was so violent and powerful, everyone was stunned, but they were also filled with excitement. With a genius like Ling Han standing guard, what was Hysteria's army worth? It was not just Ling Han. Xi and Chihu, Wu Haoyang, and Lin Yulian also displayed world-shaking strength. Though Feng Wuding had been repeatedly robbed by Ling Han, making him look weak, he was in truth a prodigy that was only inferior to Ling Han. The advancement of his cultivation level was frightening as he had already reached the middle stage of the 4th tier. Although his battle prowess had yet to reach the 6th tier, he could already sweep aside all other 5th tier elites. It had to be admitted that the Genesis world of the last era had really helped them greatly. In this battle, though the Flaming Frost Realm did not have the advantage of the dimensional suppression, Ling Han, Xi and Chihu, and the other prodigies were too awesome. Their presence had the effect of stabilizing the situation, and they actually managed to defend their base successfully. Though they had paid the price of over 100 heavenly venerates dying in battle, and more than 2,000 were severely wounded, a great victory still made everyone feel satisfied and gave rise to a strong confidence. Finally, their only path was not just retreat. They could also stand their ground. After a great victory, everyone hurriedly took advantage of the time to rest and reorganize. Now that they had not given up their base, it also meant that Hysteria's army could possibly launch an attack not too long after. Ling Han's journey could only be postponed indefinitely as well. At present, there was definitely no way he could leave. As expected, only a few years later, Hysteria's army attacked again, but was forced back. In the past, there were only Xi and Chihu and the other 2 great elites, but adding Ling Han and Feng Wuding, 2 people with 6th-tier battle prowess, now had a tremendous influence on the battle. Chapter 2939, 2939, Take Your Life. Chapter 2939, 2939, Take Your Life. 2939, Take Your Life. Within the next 100 years, the Hysteria army would go on to launch over 30 assaults of varying scale. However, they all fell flat, unable to advance a single step. In all these battles, Feng Wuding displayed the best performance of all. It was as though he wanted to prove to everyone that he was the only one who could defeat Hysteria and become the savior of the Genesis world. To that end, he used every ounce of strength in all his battles without holding anything back. In the most recent battle, he released 21-dimensional projections, surpassing Ling Han's previous number of 20. It was obvious Feng Wuding was satisfied with being able to prove that he was better than Ling Han. On the other hand, Ling Han wasn't all too concerned about it. Such contests for pride were pointless. Actual strength in battle was what he cared about. 200 years, 500 years. They had defended against the Hysteria army countless times. In the blink of an eye, 1,000,000 years had passed. Ling Han wasn't going to stop with his decapitation missions. Even though they were now able to withstand the attacks from the Hysteria army, there would be a difference in the number of casualties with and without an intelligent monster taking charge. Ling Han would bring Bai Meifeng, Xian Feng, and Fu Yuan with him. Given his current strength, he was more than capable of guaranteeing their safety, so he thought it would be good to train them a little as well. On the other hand, Feng Wuding was trying to compete with Ling Han on all fronts. He also started his own little guerrilla strike force, taking along 3 members as he continuously killed his way into enemy territory. He wanted to compete against Ling Han on their battle records. However, Feng Wuding didn't have the ability to traverse the void. There were a few times he got trapped by the enemy, and while he was able to escape, his 3 teammates all perished under the encirclement. After repeated failures, it didn't matter if he was the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era. There was no heavenly venerate willing to risk their life with him. As a result, Feng Wuding could only try to do things by himself. However, there was one time he fell for the enemy's trap and had to be rescued by Ling Han, Xian Chihu, and the other generals. After that, he never charged into enemy territory again. It was too embarrassing. Ha ha ha. Bai Meifeng, Xian Feng, and Fu Yuan burst out laughing when they heard the news. They didn't like Feng Wuding to begin with. It was natural they would be ecstatic to see him fail so miserably. To think he dreams of competing against us. I hope he learns his lesson now, Bai Meifeng said. He had always resented Feng Wuding ever since he lost to him. However, because they were equal in terms of cultivation level, Bai Meifeng didn't have any advantage in battle, and thus could not defeat Feng Wuding. Come, come, come. Let's drink. Fu Yuan raised his cup. Ling Han and the others also raised their cups and clinked them together. They were not within the base at the moment. Instead, they were at a spot about 3 days' journey from it. Originally, this place was just a regular valley, but it had become quite a scenic spot because of the clashing of 2 dimensions. That said, Feng Wuding is powerful indeed. If Boss wasn't around, he would be virtually unbeatable by anyone of the same cultivation level, Xian Feng mused. Bai Meifeng and Fu Yuan nodded their heads. They couldn't deny that. There's no helping it. He only has his own luck to blame for being born in the wrong era and meeting our boss. Fu Yuan laughed. Even though both Fu Yuan and Xian Feng were both 5th tiers, they had no qualms about calling Ling Han their boss. One's cultivation level mattered when it came to the realm of martial prowess, but one's strength even more so. Once Boss gains another level and becomes a 5th tier, he will have a 7th tier's battle prowess. There will be no one stopping him then, Fu Yuan said. Even though he was just trying to flatter Ling Han, there was an ounce of truth in it as well. Ling Han was just about to speak up, but he suddenly turned his head, ears perked. What's wrong? Bai Meifeng asked. Ling Han gestured for everyone to keep quiet. After a while, he said, We have a guest. Who? Bai Meifeng and the others asked. It's us. A voice resounded as a plain-looking man casually approached. He had a faint smile on his face, and his eyes were narrowed into slits, as though they couldn't be opened. May I ask who you are? Fu Yuan immediately stood up. Also, you said us? Xian Feng asked. Soon, more figures appeared, each one of them with an imposing presence. 5th tier, 5th tier, 5th tier. These people were all 5th tier heavenly venerates, and there were as many as 88 of them. Each one of them had a terrifying aura. Ling Han swept a glance across. Something I can help you with? We're here to take your life, the plain-looking person said. I take it you're all just like Meng Dong and are Hysteria's agents? Ling Han acknowledged them. Indeed, the plain-looking person said. He bowed slightly. I am Huangfu Dongyue. Little brother, I've wanted to meet you for a long time, and now that we have, I must say, it's such a pity. He was implying that if Ling Han hadn't betrayed Hysteria, then they would have been a family and would have met much earlier. Ling Han laughed. Well, better late than never. Another 5th tier pointed a finger at Ling Han and rebuked angrily, Ling Han, do you think you can just do as you please after betraying the main body? What? Bai Meifeng, Xian Feng, and Fu Yuan were all taken aback. Judging from the other party's words, it seemed like Ling Han was one of Hysteria's agents, but had switched sides. Ling Han, was one of Hysteria's men? The news was too overwhelming. If it were to spread to the realm battlefield, it would be sure to cause a great commotion. Who would dare use one of Hysteria's men? After all, he could suddenly go berserk and stab you in the back. Bai Meifan looked at Ling Han and asked, "Brother Ling, you?" "Boss." Xian Feng and Fu Yuan were also astonished. Ling Han casually waved his hand. "I'll explain it to you later." "There is no later. You are going to die here right now," Huang Fu Dongyue coldly remarked. "Is that so?" Ling Han looked around at the 5th tier Heavenly Venerates and couldn't help laughing. "It's not that I'm looking down on you all, but to me, you're all nothing more than cannon fodder. I can take you all on with one hand, even if you come at me together." "Then I'd like to see you try," Huang Fu Dongyue said in a somber tone. He then shouted, "For the main body. Our deaths will only return us to the main body." 10 5th tier Heavenly Venerates immediately shouted back, and then leapt forward together. After that, something strange happened as all 10 of them started to fuse together. Their resulting aura skyrocketed, instantly breaking through the limitations of the 5th tier and reaching 6th tier. Bai Meifan and the rest were flabbergasted. How was this possible? Ling Han had seen it before, so he wasn't surprised. However, he couldn't help frowning. This was their trump card. Hysteria should know that he already had a 6th tier's battle prowess. It didn't matter what kind of combination monster they threw at him. Even if all these people were to fuse together, they wouldn't be able to beat him as long as they didn't reach the 7th tier. 7th tier? That was not possible. Even if Hysteria's body became an entire dimension, it couldn't possibly create a 7th tier combatant. However, these people had sure been hiding themselves for a significant amount of time, and now they were revealing themselves all in one go. Wouldn't this just be a foolish act if they weren't absolutely sure of themselves? Hysteria would never do something so foolish. Moreover, these people had actual intelligence, and naturally wouldn't be so stupid, either. Hold on. How did all these people suddenly show up here? Chapter 2940, 2940 Fatal Trap. Chapter 2940, 2940 Fatal Trap. 2940 Fatal Trap. For the sake of the main body, another 10 people shouted loudly and then fused together, turning into a creature that was 30 meters tall. It had many arms, legs, and eyes, becoming a complete monster. 2 6th-tier monsters. More and more people released loud roars and fused together, and there were more and more 6th-tier monsters. Ling Han sighed. After these people were fused together, they possessed the unique trait of hysteria, and he could not absorb their life essence. This was a pity, but they still had heavenly venerable seals, and these would not disappear with their fusion. This time, he was not going to fall for hysteria's trick again. After he killed them, he would directly search their souls. "Ling Han, it's time for us to return to the main body," Huang Dongyue said. Right now, only he and 7 other people hadn't fused together yet. Ling Han shook his head. "Not interested. That's not up to you." Huang Dongyue let out a battle cry, and the 8 6th-tier monsters immediately charged towards Ling Han. First-grade seals lit up, showing astonishing might. 6th-tier battle prowess further boosted with first-grade seals. Just how powerful was this? It really isn't enough. Ling Han was completely unconcerned. Fusion monsters only had the battle prowess of early-stage 6th tier. Even if they were boosted with first-grade seals, they would only be able to reach late-stage 6th tier in terms of battle prowess. Meanwhile, Ling Han had already completely stabilized his cultivation level during these years. His basic power was similarly at the early stage of the 6th tier. He also possessed a first-grade seal, as well as 9th and 8th-grade combination seals. Not only was his power not inferior, but it was even stronger. However, there were 8 6th-tier monsters on the opposing side. After all, if they worked together, they could still match Ling Han and his group, with only a slight disadvantage. Charge! Huang Fu Dongyue and the others also charged towards Bai Meifan, Fu Yuan, and Xian Feng. The battle royale began. Though Bai Meifan was a 4th tier, he was a super genius that was not inferior to Xi and Chihu. Moreover, after all these years, he had also reached the peak stage of the 4th tier, and his battle prowess soared to peak stage 5th tier. Not only was he not inferior to Huangfu Dongyue and the others, he wasn't at a disadvantage even in a battle of 2 against 1. However, Fu Yuan and Xian Feng weren't as powerful. It should be known that Huangfu Dongyue and the others had all received a first-grade, Heavenly Venerable Seal inheritance package from Hysteria. With the boost of more than 80 times of power, they were instantly pushed to their limits. Moreover, Huangfu Dongyue and the others still had an advantage in numbers. If it weren't for Bai Meifan continuously rescuing them, Fu Yuan and Xian Feng wouldn't have been able to last this long at all. Even so, they were still in a perilous situation. It was possible that they would collapse at any moment. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and as he exchanged blows with the 8 fusion monsters, he continued to rush towards Fu Yuan and Xian Feng. Boom! He threw out a punch, instantly sending 3 5th tiers flying and resolving Xian Feng's pressing crisis. However, Fu Yuan was struck by 2 5th tiers and instantly threw up blood violently. He stumbled, his face as pale as paper. Ling Han hurriedly charged forward. Although the 8 fusion monsters tried their best to stop him, they still couldn't succeed. He stretched out a hand and grabbed out at Fu Yuan. Right at this moment, light suddenly lit up on Fu Yuan's chest. Xiao, xiao, xiao. 3 spots of light flew out and then rapidly enlarged, turning into 3 figures. No, 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 they could not be considered figures, but rather 3 monsters. But the aura they exuded was incredibly terrifying. Furthermore, the aura they exuded was incredibly strong and had shockingly reached the 6th tier, even stronger than those 8 fusion monsters. They were actually those 3 monsters that had sniped Ling Han in the Genesis world of the last era. Why had they flown out from Fu Yuan's body? Had Fu Yuan been coerced? Or, when he had been completely unaware, these 3 monsters had possessed him? This should not be possible. For better or worse, he was still a 5th tier elite, and even if he was no match for a 6th tier, how could he not have the slightest reaction when 3 6th tier elites had hidden themselves inside his body? Hong. The 3 great 6th tiers attacked, each channeling a 2nd grade seal, which boosted their power by more than 70 times, pressing down on Ling Han. The 8 fusion monsters also took advantage of the opening to make their move. The number of heavenly venerable seals flickering on their bodies instantly reached as many as 10, and their power increased explosively by more than 400 times. These were combination seals. They had not used them previously because they wanted to lull Ling Han into a false sense of security. It should be known that there were a total of over 100 of them, and each of them had a 1st grade seal, which was completely capable of forming a sequence. Now, 3 peak stage 6th tier elites were attacking Ling Han head-on, and there were also 8 other 6th tier elites who were slightly weaker that had been boosted more than 400 times in power. They had also boosted their battle prowess to the peak stage of the 6th tier, and both sides formed a pincer attack. This was a trap, a deadly trap aimed at Ling Han. Everything that had happened previously had all been an act, all for the sake of this moment, to deal a fatal blow to Ling Han. Fu Yuan smiled coldly. Judging by his understanding of Ling Han definitely wouldn't be able to resolve this. Ling Han, boss! Bai Meifan and Xian Feng both exclaimed in surprise. This seemed to be a dead end. Whether it was Xian Chihu or Feng Wooding in his place, they could only die helplessly. Ling Han also felt his hair stand on ends. This was the battle prowess of a total of 11 peak stage 6th tiers, and every single one of them was stronger than him. Furthermore, it was not just by a bit, either. Their combined force was enough to deal him severe injury. But the more severe the circumstances, the calmer Ling Han became. He felt his fighting spirit rise up from the depths of his heart. This was what was interesting. He released a battle cry. Wong. All the dimensions in his body were released. It was not just 1 or 2, but a total of 200 of them. They were not projections, either, but actual dimensions. 200 medium-level dimensions that were extremely close to reaching high-level. What kind of concept was this? So what if they were 6th tiers? Their bodies involuntarily trembled, and their attacks were slightly halted. However, the sixth tier was the sixth tier. After all, as power surged, cracks appeared on the 200 dimensions. Taking advantage of this chance, Ling Han leaped and retreated rapidly. He grabbed Bai Meifeng and Xianfeng, and then tore a rip into space. He stepped through, and the 200 dimensions were absorbed into his body at the same time. Shio! The hole in the void closed up behind him. In the instant that the hole in the void closed up, Ling cast a deep look at Fu Yuan. It was as if he was staring at a dead man. Then, he turned around and left resolutely. Shua! A black shadow whipped over, exuding a terrifying aura that could suppress the ages and destroy the heavens. Hysteria. Heh, it was really one move after another. Ling Han had no way out. If he left the void at this moment, he would have to fight against those 11 sixth-tier elites again. He released a battle cry and channeled all the 8th grade seals at the same time. He burst with his full power to greet this blow from Hysteria. Pung! Instantly, his whole body trembled violently, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Even if Hysteria had only sent out a doppelganger, its power had still reached the peak stage of the 6th tier, and it was even stronger than those subordinates outside. However, Ling Han still managed to block this blow. Hysteria was incomparably cold. Though its first strike had not succeeded, it was completely emotionless. It delivered another attack. The black tentacle swept through the void. Its main body was far away in the realm battlefield, but its attack still easily reached its target. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ling Han had already taken a step. He tore a rip into space again and instantly exited the void. Hysteria's attack came. This strike had followed him out of the void and was continuing to whip towards Ling Han. Scram! Ling Han roared loudly and attacked with both fists. The 200 dimensions were unleashed at the same time, forming an incomparably powerful oppressive force. Finally, Hysteria's tentacle was blasted back. Chapter 2941. 2941 Setting Out on a New Journey. Chapter 2941. 2941 Setting Out on a New Journey. 2941 Setting Out on a New Journey. Who? Ling Han tossed out Xianfeng and Bai Meifeng. The three of them lay on the ground, panting heavily. It had been extremely dangerous just now. Whether it was the 11 6th-tier elites ganging up on Ling Han or Hysteria's attack at the end, those were both perilous situations. If Ling Han's reaction speed had been slightly slower, or his strength had been the slightest bit lower, he would definitely have been a dead man by now. I never would have thought that Fu Yuan was actually a traitor. Bai Meifeng slammed his fist into the ground, revealing an expression of fury. Xianfeng was outraged as well, and also felt an indescribable feeling of pain. The four of them had fought side by side for several 100 million years. Who would have thought that the companion that they had left their backs to would actually be one of Hysteria's subordinates? Ling Han's expression was also very cold. If it was just his suspicions that Fu Yuan had been coerced at first, then he naturally could confirm by now that Fu Yuan was also one of Hysteria's pawns, just like Meng Dong. However, he was even better hidden. In fact, he had even boldly appeared as a companion by Ling Han's side, and the only reason for that was to find a chance to kill Ling Han. In the decapitation mission carried out previously, Hysteria had ambushed him, and Ling Han almost had not managed to return. Now that he was thinking back on it, it had to have been Fu Yuan that had leaked his whereabouts. Ling Han had always been looking for the enemy agent that was near him. The one he had suspected the most had been Xi and Chihu, but when Xi and Chihu and Wu Haoyang had come together to save him previously, Ling Han was convinced that though Xi and Chihu was no good guy, he would not betray his principles. Now that the truth was out, he was still somewhat unwilling to believe it. If I see him next time, I will definitely chop off his head and dig out his heart to see what color his heart is, Xianfeng shouted loudly. This bastard! Just what great benefits has Hysteria bestowed on him that he would actually betray his own people? Bai Meifeng said through gritted teeth. Also, what the heck is going on with those people? How can they fuse with one another and become something so bizarre? Both of them turned to look at Ling Han at the same time, naturally hoping that Ling Han could give them an answer. Ling Han organized his thoughts and revealed how Hysteria had set up his pawns years ago. He did not hide his identity. They were his brothers. Was there any need to hide things from them? Xin Feng and Bai Meifan naturally would not suspect Ling Han. With Hysteria laying out a trap to kill him like this, if there was still a problem with Ling Han, that would be too unfathomable. I never imagined that Hysteria had pulled off such a cunning plot, Bai Meifan exclaimed. Everyone's impression of Hysteria was that it was extremely powerful, and even 7th tiers would have to join forces to be able to resist it successfully, but it was also because of such great power that they overlooked the side of Hysteria that was intelligent. Even if Hysteria hadn't had intelligence at that time, even if it had become an idiot in the explosion of the Genesis world of the last era, leaving behind only a sliver of its soul, after regaining the strength of a 7th tier, and after so many epochs of development, how could it be that it still couldn't develop astonishing intelligence? It had not played any tricks all this while, because it had not needed to. Its strength had been enough to overwhelm its enemies. However, after being unable to take down the flaming frost realm for a long time, Hysteria finally adjusted its battle strategy. From sending out undercover agents to adjusting the composition of the army and adding in intelligent creations were all things that showed Hysteria's desire for change. However, after this battle, Hysteria's undercover spies should have been more or less eliminated, Ling Han said. The only unfortunate thing was that as the 8 fusion monsters died, the 81st grade seals they had would also disappear. That was 81st grade seals, and it was extremely possible that they could form a sequence, turning into extremely terrifying combination seals. Ling Han felt like his heart was bleeding. Initially, he had already considered them as his private property, yet it was all for naught in the end, which made him extremely depressed. They returned to base camp and did not speak of how they had been ambushed, because this involved Ling Han's identity. Furthermore, it would not be of any help even if they spoke of it. Zhou and the others were aware of this even earlier. However, the bomb beside him had finally exploded. Ling Han still felt a sense of relief, and was even a little glad. What if they had targeted the Empress, Hun Yo, Ling Shi, Ling Jianxue, and the others? Then it would really have been difficult for Ling Han to deal with. Because Ling Han's strength had advanced to the 6th tier, he had also become one of the commanders-in-chief, and was on equal footing with Xian Chihu and the others. Additionally, there was also Feng Wuding, who turned them from the previous 3 great generals into the current 5 heavenly kings. Ling Han made a suggestion. No matter what, they had to assign some people to the Genesis world of the last era, especially from among the 5 of them. The clash with Hysteria would still have to depend on the high-end powerhouses. That was because it was Hysteria that had started this invasion. If Hysteria itself could not be defeated, it could endlessly launch attacks, and there would never come a day of peace. So ultimately, war would still have to depend on 7th tier battle prowess. Resisting here was passive. Even if Hysteria's troops could be halted eternally here, so what? Would that resolve the problem of Hysteria? Regarding this suggestion, even Xian Chihu and Feng Wuding agreed very much. Even if they had a lot of conflicts with Ling Han, they all had a high opinion of themselves and thought that they could deal with the great problem of Hysteria. Even if they retreated slightly here, as long as they could advance to the 6th tier or 7th tier, sacrificing some territory would be worth it. To say the least, the advancement of the profound negative realm to the transcendent level was very smooth. Even if they lost the flaming frost realm, it would not be the end of the world. After a round of discussions, the 5 of them reached an agreement to resume the travels to the Genesis world of the last era. However, the 5 of them could not all leave. Otherwise, if there was no one standing guard here, who knew what kind of trouble the various forces would cause? After drawing lots, Wu Haoyang and Lin Yulian were those to leave with the first batch, and it was still for a period of 100,000 years. When they returned, Ling Han, Xian Chihu, and Feng Wuding drew lots again. The result was that Feng Wuding became the one who had to stay behind. He could only be mobilized next time. Ling Han brought the Empress and Hun Yo with him. This time, it was a mutual decision made by the 5 commanders. Naturally, they could decide whom they would go with. However, this was too coincidental. He actually was in the same batch with Xi and Chihu again. Ling Han deliberately avoided Xi and Chihu and set out quietly along with the Empress and Hun Yo. Otherwise, that guy might make a move on him again. The three of them arrived at the Genesis world of the last era. They then started to search for a spatial passageway. Ling Han's expression was filled with anticipation. If he could advance to the 5th tier this time, he would be able to possess the battle prowess of the 7th tier and become the strongest existence in the Genesis world. Although there were also differences in strength among 7th tiers, he could still be unafraid of anyone. However, their luck wasn't all that good. After searching for 90,000 years, they finally discovered a spatial passageway that led to a new dimension. However, this place was extremely dangerous. Energy storms were everywhere, and even if Ling Han possessed the battle prowess of the 6th tier, it was still difficult for him. His gains in these 10,000 years were pitifully little. Time was up, and they returned. After arriving at the base camp, Ling Han discovered that everyone was looking at him strangely. Chapter 2942, 2942 Leaked Secret. Chapter 2942, 2942 Leaked Secret. 2942 Leaked Secret. As Ling Han walked along, he noticed that everyone was glancing at him with strange expressions as if they were looking at a monster. In fact, some of them didn't even try to conceal the look of disgust in their eyes. Fuck. Have I offended you or something? Ling Han and the Empress weren't too affected by this, but Hun Yo directly glared back at them. What, did they think that she didn't know how to glare? Boss, Ling Han. Fourth brother, Xian Feng, the Rain Emperor, and the others all ran over, their expressions extremely solemn. What's wrong? Ling Han asked with a smile. Has the sky collapsed? Even if it has, I can help you guys hold it up. His battle prowess was at the 6th tier now, so he truly had the right to utter such words. Boss, something has genuinely gone wrong, Xian Feng hurriedly said. He paused for a moment before continuing. I don't know who did it, but someone exposed your relationship with Hysteria, and now news of this is spreading like wildfire. Ling Han's expression became cold and solemn. Few people knew that he had been selected by Hysteria before. Apart from his wives, the only other people who knew were by Maifan, Xian Feng, Zhou Hong, and the others. However, Ling Han was certain that none of them would leak this secret. Who could it be? Thinking about it, it could only be the subordinates of Hysteria, such as Huangfu Dongyue. When trying to kill someone, sometimes it wasn't necessary to target them yourself. Borrowing the hands of another was equally effective, and it could even save some effort. It was definitely these people who had spread the news of Ling Han's relationship with Hysteria. Their aim was to drive a wedge between Ling Han and the others, and perhaps even cause the others to become hostile toward him and eventually try to hunt him down. At that time, Ling Han would have no allies, and he would instead end up being hunted by both sides. Taking a step back, would Ling Han feel disheartened if he were hunted by his own allies? Even though Ling Han knew that this was Hysteria's scheme, he would still feel fury toward those who treated him with contempt and disdain. Would this cause him to feel disappointed in all of them? In any case, Hysteria didn't really care how big the wedge between Ling Han and the others became. All it needed was for Huangfu Dongyue and the others to spread some rumors. After all, this wouldn't cost them anything. These thoughts quickly flashed through Ling Han's mind. He had to admit that this was an extremely ruthless and effective scheme from Hysteria. He could guarantee that he would never take commands from Hysteria. However, how many others would trust him? Ling Han! Someone shouted as they flew over from the distance. He looked Ling Han up and down with a disdainful expression before saying, "The 4 generals are calling you over for a meeting." Ling Han was extremely ticked off. This person was Feng Wuding's subordinate, and he had also come from the Genesis world of the last era. He was quite powerful, and he had already reached the 3rd tier right now. This was indeed quite impressive. However, would Ling Han be afraid of a measly 3rd tier cultivator? I'm a commander of the coalition army, yet you dare to directly call my name? Are you trying to disrespect your superior? Ling Han asked. His gaze was cold as he looked at the person. Regardless of what was going to happen after this, and regardless of how they were going to resolve this situation, he definitely wouldn't allow others to trample over his dignity. Everyone needed to have a bottom line. The third-tier Heavenly Venerate hadn't imagined that Ling Han would scold him, because he thought that Ling Han should have been extremely panicked after his relationship with Hysteria had been exposed. With that being the case, how could he have the confidence to scold him? The third-tier Heavenly Venerate wanted to retort Ling Han, yet he couldn't help but feel apprehensive before this sixth-tier Heavenly Venerate. His courage instantly vanished without a trace. He hesitated for a moment before clasping his hands in respect and saying, "This subordinate doesn't dare?" "What's the matter?" Ling Han asked calmly. "What's the matter? Aren't you aware already? Why are you still playing dumb?" However, he had just been intimidated by Ling Han, so how would he dare to talk back? He could only say, "Lord, the 4 commanders are currently waiting for you in the meeting hall." "You're finally speaking a bit like a human," Bai Meifan said coldly. He had always disliked Fengwuding. Moreover, he was the grandson of a 7th-tier Heavenly Venerate, so he naturally didn't need to choose his words carefully. The 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate wanted to glare at him, yet upon recalling that Bai Meifan was one of the greatest prodigies of all eternity, he immediately suppressed his urge. Even though Bai Meifan wasn't as prodigious as Fengwuding, he was still countless times more powerful than this messenger. If he dared to provoke Bai Meifan, he would almost deserve to be beaten into a cripple. Underlings should understand that they're nothing more than underlings. Why are you so keen to rush to the front line? Do you want to become cannon fodder? The Rain Emperor asked in a calm voice. The 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate didn't dare to provoke Ling Han and the others, so he could only keep his mouth shut and endure this scolding. In any case, there was a trial awaiting Ling Han, and he would definitely receive his punishment there. That being the case, there was indeed no need for him to rush to the front lines. "Lord, after you," he said as he respectfully made a gesture of invitation. Ling Han completely ignored him. Even though he set off, it wasn't in the direction of the meeting hall. "Lord!" The 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate hurriedly ran over to stop him. Pung! The Empress lashed out with a palm strike, instantly sending the 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate flying. Crack! He flew back, causing a long and deep pit to form in the ground. The Empress had advanced to the 4th tier quite a while ago, and there was the power of 100 dimensions in her body. Even though she was unable to challenge those a tier above her now, would this extra tier of cultivation not cause her power to become overwhelming? Ling Han paused for a brief moment, saying, "I just got back, so I need to have a rest first. Are you going to stop me?" "I wouldn't dare," the 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate said. He had no option but to swallow his displeasure. He lowered his head, his eyes filled with resentment and fury. He was at the 3rd tier. He was a mighty 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate who stood at the pinnacle of the world. Ling Han smiled as he continued to walk forward. They wanted to put him on trial? Heh, he had a clear conscience, so who had the right to try him and sentence him? After he returned to his residence, the Rain Emperor and the others hurriedly asked him what his plan was. "My plan?" Ling Han replied with a smile. "I'll counter soldiers with arms and water with an earthweir." "Fourth brother, what in the world is going on?" the Rain Emperor asked. He had also heard from others that Ling Han had some kind of relationship with Hysteria. Ling Han explained to them how he had been chosen by Hysteria, not hiding any of the details. "So Lord Zhou and Lord Lin already know about this," the others said, breathing a sigh of relief. Since the 6th-tier elites already knew about this, it would definitely be very easy to resolve. The trial tomorrow will most likely only be for show. Lord Zhou and Lord Chu aren't ordinary 6th-tier elites. They're only a small step away from advancing to the 7th tier, and this is a step that they might take at any time. Perhaps they've already advanced to the 7th tier. Their words will definitely carry a huge weight. But we still need to be careful. Some people might try to seize this opportunity to cause trouble and smear little Han's reputation, the large black dog said. "If that happens, then these people are definitely listening to the commands of Xi and Chihu and Fengwuding. Otherwise, who would dare to do that? Bai Meifan said. Everyone nodded in agreement. Most likely the only people who would take advantage of this situation to attack Ling Han were Xi and Chihu and Fengwuding. A day quickly passed by. It was extremely calm, and Xi and Chihu and the others didn't send anyone over to call Ling Han. However, everyone knew that this was the calm before the storm. The quieter it was now, the more terrifying the storm would be when it arrived. The next day, Ling Han didn't need anyone to come over to call him. He confidently strode toward the meeting hall. What if the others wanted to attack and smear him? Then go for it. He would take everything that they could throw at him. When he arrived at the meeting hall, he saw that there were already many people gathered around. Meanwhile, Lin Yulian, Xi and Chihu, and the others were sitting high up on the platform. The show was about to begin. Chapter 2943, 2943 Debate. Chapter 2943, 2943 Debate. 2943 Debate. After entering the meeting hall, Ling Han walked toward the main seats on the platform. He was one of the 5 commanders, so one of these seats naturally belonged to him. Hold it there, Fengwuding suddenly said. He raised a hand and continued, Ling Han, your position is in question now, so you don't have the right to sit here. Oh? I don't have the right just because you said so? Ling Han said as he looked at Fengwuding. You're nothing but a defeated opponent, so quit jabbering in front of me. Do you want to lose everything again? Fuck. Fengwuding's expression instantly became extremely colorful, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Being defeated by Ling Han was the only stain on his reputation. Moreover, he had been stripped of his wealth by Ling Han several times, and this had hurt him to the core. Now, Ling Han was exposing these old wounds before everyone, so he was naturally both humiliated and infuriated. Ling Han, let's battle. I refuse to believe that I'll lose to you again, he roared. His cultivation speed was faster than Ling Han's, so he now possessed a slight advantage over him in terms of cultivation level. As a result, he rediscovered some of his confidence. Come on then, Ling Han said as he crooked a finger at him. Whoever doesn't dare to fight is a bastard. Everyone was rendered speechless. They were all heavenly venerates, so could they try to speak in a more elegant manner? Why did they sound like hooligans? Fengwuding angrily stood up, and he was just about to launch an attack. Stop, Xi and Chihu said as he reached over to block him. Don't forget what our purpose is today. Fengwuding's heart jolted upon hearing this. Indeed, he had almost been led off track by Ling Han. They were trying Ling Han for colluding with the enemy today. So how had the conversation ended up so far astray? The others also slapped their heads in realization. Ling Han's ability to control the conversation was far too powerful, so much so that they had also been unknowingly dragged down the wrong track. Ling Han, what do you have to say about the current rumors? Fengwuding asked. Ling Han shook his head and replied, Don't try to change the topic. Why don't I have the right to sit here? Did you decide? Or was it someone else? Before the investigation is complete, Ling Han is still one of the 5 commanders. Thus, one of these seats belongs to him. Lin Yulian finally said. She naturally supported Ling Han. Wu Haoying nodded and said, I agree. I disagree, Fengwuding immediately said. I also disagree, Xi and Chihu said. It was 2 votes to 2, so whom should they listen to? Ling Han strode forward and directly sat down on the empty seat, saying, Since I haven't been dismissed, I'm naturally still one of the commanders. That gives me the right to cast a vote. Everyone nodded in acknowledgement. Ling Han had won the first round of the power struggle. Fengwuding glanced at Xi and Chihu, and he saw that his expression was calm and composed. It was as if he hadn't been affected at all. Upon seeing this, he also gradually calmed down. Losing the first round didn't matter much in the scheme of things. As long as they could prove that Ling Han was a traitor, he would ultimately become nothing more than a rat whom everyone viewed with scorn. Commander? He would be criticized by all, and his name would be mentioned with disdain for eternity. Fine. Before the trial is complete, We'll tentatively concede that you're still one of the 5 commanders, Feng Wuding said. However, he was feeling slightly puzzled at this moment. He was clearly more talented than Xian Chihu, and his future was also brighter. So why had he become Xian Chihu's pawn instead? Why was he the one doing all the hard work? Ling Han sneered and said, "Do I need you, a defeated opponent, to concede this? Regardless of whether you concede it or not, I am me, and this won't change a single bit." Detestable. Utterly detestable. Feng Wuding felt a strong urge to kill someone. He was clearly someone with powerful self-control, so why was he always enraged by Ling Han? He took a deep breath and said, "Ling Han, there are rumors saying that you're a subordinate of Hysteria. Is that true?" "These allegations are absolutely untrue," Ling Han said with a shake of his head. He completely denied the accusation. This was nothing but a rumor, so who could prove it? Feng Wuding faltered upon hearing this. This reply was far too casual. No? Did he want to end the trial just like that? His voice became baleful as he said, "Then do you have any proof that you're not Hysteria's subordinate? Then do you have any proof that I am Hysteria's subordinate?" Ling Han retorted. Fuck. Feng Wuding couldn't help but falter upon hearing this. Was he the one doing the interrogation, or was he the one being interrogated? Ling Han, stop trying to prevaricate, he roared. Prevaricate your mom. Ling Han sneered. Did you call me here just to mess around with me? Are you retarded? Even if I was genuinely working with Hysteria, do you think I would admit it? Also, I have suspicions that it's actually you who is working with Hysteria. Do you have any proof to say otherwise? Ling Han asked in a firm voice. Feng Wuding immediately jumped up and roared, "Are you trying to smear me?" Ling Han chuckled and said, "I haven't even accused you of smearing me yet. Why are you getting all worked up?" Ling Han. Feng Wuding spat through gritted teeth. He truly wanted to charge forward to attack him. Looking at his seething expression, and then looking at Ling Han's calm and composed manner, the others couldn't help but shake their heads. Even though Feng Wuding was the son of destiny from the Genesis world of the last era, his mental cultivation was truly very lacking. Ling Han laughed heartily and said, "What? You want to fight?" Ling Han. Xian Chihu finally said, "There's no smoke without fire. Simply denying the accusation won't resolve the issue. Moreover, if this issue isn't resolved comprehensively, who will still dare to trust you in the future? Who will dare to battle alongside you?" These words were far more refined, and they were standing on the side of righteousness. Thus, Ling Han definitely couldn't brush them aside with a simple denial. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Oh, how do you want me to prove my innocence? Perhaps I'll revert to my true form if you people refine me for a while?" According to the experiences of the 7th tier heavenly venerates who have battled against Hysteria for countless years, Hysteria possesses the ability to engulf one's life essence. This is also why it was able to overtake everyone else and become the most powerful 7th tier. Xian Chihu looked at Ling Han and continued, "If you also possess such an ability, then it's clear that there's a relationship between you and Hysteria." He didn't directly accuse Ling Han of being Hysteria's subordinate. Instead, he was trying to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was a relationship between Ling Han and Hysteria. After that, it would only be a matter of time before Ling Han was nailed onto a pillar of shame. Comparing Xian Chihu to Feng Wuding, it was abundantly clear just how much more scheming and experienced the former was. Meanwhile, Feng Wuding appeared like nothing more than a mere child. "Bring him over," Xian Chihu said with a wave of his hand. A person was immediately dragged over. Their cultivation was sealed, and they were only a measly 8th heaven celestial king. Pa! Xian Chihu's movements were lightning quick as he smashed the celestial king into smithereens. Everyone was astonished. Even though this person was only an 8th heaven celestial king, which was akin to trash in their eyes, seeing them being suddenly killed in such a bloody manner was still enough to make their minds shudder. This celestial king committed a great crime, so there's no need to pity his death, Xian Chihu said in explanation. Everyone, carefully observe his life essence. They all nodded before observing the celestial king's life essence with their divine sense. In the next instant, expressions of shock spread across their faces. Like in front of a thirsty horse lapping water, all the life essence was surging toward Ling Han. Gasp! Ling Han had the same ability as Hysteria. Was he truly a subordinate of Hysteria? Chapter 2944, 2944 Universally Condemned. Chapter 2944, 2944 Universally Condemned. 2944 Universally Condemned. Ling Han was also slightly annoyed. Being able to engulf life essence to raise his cultivation was indeed a very astonishing and useful ability. However, this was also something that he couldn't control at all. Right now, everyone's gaze was locked onto him, and even those who had been undecided before were now looking at him with expressions of contempt and disgust. He was Hysteria's subordinate, so he was naturally despised by all. Ling Han, do you have anything else to say? Feng Wuding asked with a smug expression. Ling Han shrugged and said, so what if this is the case? It's just a coincidence. You're trying to say this is a coincidence? Feng Wuding said with a humph. Then why don't I have the same ability? How would I know? Because you're an utter fool? Ling Han casually replied. You. Feng Wuding was on the verge of exploding in fury. Xian Chihu waved a hand and said, Ling Han, you're also a fellow commander, so we won't make our judgments so quickly. However, this matter is of great importance, so it's vital that you cooperate with us. Right now, you need to give up all resistance and surrender yourself. As for whether you're genuinely a subordinate of Hysteria or not, this will naturally be determined by the 7th tier heavenly venerates. Ling Han looked at Xian Chihu. This person was truly old and scheming. He was clearly trying to capture him, yet he was making it seem as if he were doing everything for the greater good. Everyone, Lin Yulian suddenly said. Before accusing Ling Han of being Hysteria's subordinate, have you ever thought about how many enemies he's killed up until now? If he's genuinely Hysteria's subordinate, why would he do this? Many people instantly nodded in agreement. Ling Han had indeed killed countless members of Hysteria's army these past few years. In fact, at least a third of the intelligent monsters had been killed by him. Otherwise, their front lines would have definitely had to retreat an unfathomable distance. It was truly hard to believe that Ling Han was a traitor. If he hadn't done this, how could he have won our trust? Nailan Xiong said. That's right, all of this was definitely part of his plan. The destruction that he can bring to the Flaming Frost Realm and the Genesis world is definitely far greater than the damage that he's brought to Hysteria's army, someone else said. Moreover, if it weren't because of his identity as Hysteria's subordinate, how could he have marched through Hysteria's army with such ease? Someone else added. Even though Lord Xian, Lord Lin, and Lord Wu are all more powerful than Ling Han, none of them are able to do this. So be it if Ling Han only managed to do it a single time. However, he was able to do it tens of thousands of times. Is Hysteria's army truly that helpless against him? Indeed. Everyone nodded in agreement. Ling Han was indeed freakish, but in reality, his battle prowess was still slightly inferior to that of Lord Xian, Lord Lin, and Lord Wu. Even the three of them were unable to march through Hysteria's army with ease, so why was Ling Han able to do it? Moreover, he was able to do it tens of thousands of times. Was there truly nothing suspicious about this? Who would believe it? That's right. Why was Ling Han able to do that? He was definitely coordinating with Hysteria's army, and they definitely went easy on him on purpose. How detestable. If Ling Han continued to kill them like this, his reputation and prestige would definitely soar higher and higher. If he truly became our leader, we would be killed without even knowing what hit us. Everyone exploded in anger. Bai Meifeng and Xian Feng were both infuriated. As members of the guerrilla strike force, just how many dangers had they faced? Had they not witnessed this with their own eyes? Moreover, a traitor did indeed exist. However, that was Fu Yuan, not Ling Han. They tried to speak up for Ling Han, yet their voices were immediately drowned out by the seething and ferocious criticisms being launched toward him. Ling Han didn't get angry. In fact, he had already anticipated this result. He simply looked at Xian Chihu. He had fought with Xian Chihu many times, and Xian Chihu was one of the few people who knew about his trump card. He could tear apart space and freely travel between dimensions. It was because of this that he was able to march through Hysteria's army with ease. To his disappointment, however, Xian Chihu didn't speak up to explain this. This person always adhered to the principle of justice. However, they weren't facing Hysteria's army right now, so no one could blame Xian Chihu for not speaking up. In the future, he could simply say that he had forgotten about Ling Han's ability. Capture him! Everyone roared in fury. They were all filled with rage and indignance. When on the battlefield, what were they most afraid of? The answer was naturally being stabbed in the back by their own ally. Ling Han, if you still have a sense of justice in your heart, then give up your resistance and surrender yourself. Whether you're guilty or innocent, we'll naturally give you a fair trial, Xian Chihu said calmly. Feng Wuding wore a cold smile as he watched on. Ling Han was already unable to turn the tables. He was a traitor. He was the Flaming Frost Realm's enemy. What did it matter how powerful Ling Han was? What did it matter that he had been defeated by Ling Han before? Wasn't Hysteria even more freakish? It was able to suppress all of the 7th tier heavenly venerates by itself. But what did this matter? Would anyone worship Hysteria? Would anyone belittle the 7th tier heavenly venerates simply because they were weaker than Hysteria? This same principle also applied to him, Feng Wuding. Ling Han sighed upon seeing this. Were they really going to force him to do something? Lin Yulian opened her mouth again, saying, "We need to consider this matter more carefully. Ling Han is one of the 5 commanders, and his battle prowess is also astonishing. Everyone has witnessed his great contributions. Yet, you want to capture him because of a few rumors and random coincidences? This isn't just." Lin Yulian, that's where you're wrong. Everything that's related to Hysteria has to be treated with utmost caution and seriousness. Otherwise, just how terrifying will the consequences be? It's simply unimaginable, Xian Chihu said in a stern voice. As for whether Ling Han is guilty or not, the 7th tier elites will naturally be able to figure this out. He was focusing on one argument, and that was the fact that they had to treat everything related to Hysteria with utmost seriousness. Since Ling Han was suspected of being Hysteria's subordinate, they naturally had to treat this case in such a manner as well. They would rather wrongly accuse someone than wrongly exonerate someone. Most people supported this position. Capture him. Capture him. Capture him. Their roars were like crashing waves that rose one after another. Ling Han, kneel and surrender yourself, Feng Wuding said with a smug expression. He was truly in control of everything at this moment. Weakling intoxicated by success, Bai Meifan couldn't help but curse. Ling Han glanced at Feng Wuding and said, "If you want a beating, then come over here. I'll make sure to beat you until you're satisfied." "Then let's hold a vote," Lin Yulian said as she looked at Wu Haoyang. She was confident that Wu Haoyang would support her. At that time, it would be 2 votes to 2 again. Even if they ignored Ling Han's vote, they would still have no option but to put the matter aside for the time being. Xian Chihu smiled, but he didn't take the bait. Instead, he said, "I feel like everyone deserves a say on this, so it should be voted on by everyone. What do you all say?" "Yes, that's exactly right. We also want to vote." "That's right. Trying to force me to battle alongside a spy and a traitor? Heh, how could I feel at ease? If Ling Han isn't captured, then I'll have no option but to leave." "I agree. I also agree." Everyone nodded in approval. They couldn't accept Ling Han walking free. Xian Chihu shook his head at Lin Yulian, saying, "Lin Yulian, it's best that we respect everyone's opinion. Otherwise, how can we lead a disunited and demoralized army?" There was hesitation on Lin Yulian's face. Chapter 2945, 2945 Exchange of Blows. Chapter 2945, 2945 Exchange of Blows. 2945 Exchange of Blows. It went without saying that it would be a terrible idea to offend the masses. Lin Yulian possessed a battle prowess at the 6th tier, and she could easily suppress any single person beneath the platform. If they teamed up, however, they would be powerful enough to stop her in her tracks. Moreover, Xian Chihu wasn't weaker than her, and Feng Wuding was only slightly weaker than her. Thus, she couldn't do as she pleased. If she insisted on supporting Ling Han, this would potentially cause the Flaming Frost Army to fracture and collapse. Such a consequence would be far too severe. What should I do? Even though she was usually calm and composed, she couldn't help but feel at a loss at this moment. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Very well. If you want to capture me, then come over here. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Ling Han, you're far too selfish. If you choose to resist, won't that be hurting our alliance and helping our enemies? Xian Chihu said loudly, his face filled with righteousness. Holy fuck. Ling Han truly wanted to kill Xian Chihu at this moment. Even at this moment, this person was still playing his little games. It looked like he was trying to persuade Ling Han, but in reality, he was actually adding fuel to the fire. He was igniting everyone's emotions. If Ling Han truly killed someone here, even if his innocence was proven at a later date, how could he ever be forgiven? In fact, it was extremely likely that no one would even continue to investigate the reality of the situation. At that time, he would suffer injustice forever. There was hysteria pressuring them from the outside, and there was Xian Chihu causing trouble from the inside. Were they trying to force him into a dead end? Whoosh! A figure suddenly descended at this moment, radiating with a profound aura that suppressed all matter. Everyone looked over, and they involuntarily shuddered. They hurriedly bowed and said, "Our respects to Lord Zhou." This person was none other than Zhou Hong. Lin Yulian breathed a sigh of relief. When Ling Han had arrived yesterday, she had already informed Zhou Hong, Lin Xiaoyang, and the others of the situation. Even though Zhou Hong had arrived slightly later than desired, his status as a 6th-tier heavenly venerate was more than enough to suppress everyone. Zhou Hong nodded in acknowledgement and gestured for everyone to get up. By comparing Zhou Heng's aura to Lin Yulian's, it was clear that the former was far superior even though they both possessed a battle prowess at the 6th tier. This was because he wasn't an ordinary 6th tier. Instead, he was a supremely powerful elite who might advance to the 7th tier at any moment. Even though Zhou Heng's cultivation level was being suppressed here, he most likely still wouldn't lose to Lin Yulian, Xian Chihu, and Wu Haoyang, the 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity. After all, as someone who had the right to become a 7th tier, was he not one of the most paramount prodigies? Was the pinnacle cultivation level not the 7th tier? As expected of one of the strongest 6th tier heavenly venerates, he was able to immediately control the situation. Ling Han is indeed one of the seeds chosen by hysteria, Zhou Hong continued. Everyone had only just calmed down, yet their intense emotions were immediately reignited. They had only been suspicious just then, but would a 6th-tier elite lie to them? This was especially the case since it was Zhou Hong, a super elite who had the right to advance to the 7th tier. Kill him. That's right. We definitely have to kill this spy. Otherwise, who knows what abominable crime he'll commit. Kill him. Kill him. Zhou Hong held up a hand, and everyone instantly fell silent again. However, Chu Hao, Lin Xiaoyang, and I already knew about this quite a while ago. We also investigated Ling Han's mind, and we can guarantee that he's already erased the mark that hysteria left behind. He's got no relationship with hysteria. Everyone became hesitant and indecisive upon hearing this. On one side, there was solid and indisputable evidence, while on the other side, there was Zhou Hong, a supremely powerful figure. In fact, there was even Lin Xiaoyang and Chu Hao, 2 6th-tier elites. One had to realize that Chu Hao was also someone who had the right to advance to the 7th tier. The 3 of them were vouching for Ling Han right now, so who dared to question them? Who dared to disrespect their stance? At the very least, no one here dared to oppose them. This was the case for Wu Haoyang, Xian Chihu, and Feng Wuding. Lord Zhou, don't be tricked by him, Feng Wuding said, not willing to give up. Ling Han was already on the verge of being nailed to the pillar of shame. Yet Zhou Heng's arrival had quickly turned the situation on its head. Was Ling Han going to be rescued just like this? No, Feng Wuding definitely couldn't accept this. Everyone nodded in agreement. Even though Zhou Hong was extremely powerful, Hysteria was even more powerful than him. Thus, it wouldn't be surprising if Zhou Hong and the others failed to detect Hysteria's tricks. Lord Zhou, you shouldn't sacrifice your brilliant reputation for the sake of Ling Han, someone said. However, they were hidden in the crowd, and they didn't reveal their identity. Ling Han swept his gaze across the room. This person was extremely sinister, and he was purposely trying to drag Zhou Heng's name through the mud. Perhaps he was Huangfu Dongyue's companion? However, it was a shame that this person was hidden too well. Everyone here was a heavenly venerate, so their powerful and varied auras made it extremely difficult to pinpoint this person. Someone suddenly appeared and said, "Heh, I'm also of the same opinion." He was also radiating with a profound and domineering aura. This was another 6th tier, heavenly venerate. Yu Borong. Ling Han furrowed his brows. Zhou Heng's arrival was naturally good news. However, Yu Borong's arrival was the complete opposite. Yu Borong glanced at Ling Han, not concealing his powerful killing intent as he said, "Since he's suspected of being in cahoots with Hysteria, we have to capture and execute him. It's better that we wrongly execute someone than wrongly exonerate someone." "Fuck you, you old dog." Hunyo immediately jumped up and said, "Old man, what nonsense are you spewing? You dare to disrespect me?" Yu Borong said coldly. He launched a palm strike at Hunyo. "You're seeking death," Ling Han roared. His gaze was cold as he leaped forward and threw a punch. Pong! Yu Borong's attack was immediately blocked. However, Ling Han didn't stop, and he continued to charge at Yu Borong. "Old man, you really think that you can do as you please?" In terms of true battle prowess, Yu Borong was definitely more powerful than Ling Han. However, this place would suppress one's cultivation level, so those who were at the 6th tier would also be suppressed to the 5th tier. In that case, just how powerful would Yu Borong still be? Even if he were a freak who could overcome the barrier to the 6th tier while still at the peak stage of the 5th tier, the most his battle prowess could reach was still only the early stage of the 6th tier. As for Ling Han, he could reach the middle stage of the 6th tier. Thus, Ling Han would naturally have an advantage. Pong, pong, pong. After a flurry of furious exchanges, Yu Borong had no option but to retreat continuously. This caused him to roar in rage. He was a mighty 6th tier elite. Moreover, he had come here in a haughty and domineering manner for no other reason than to capture Ling Han. But now? Ling Han was actually forcing him to retreat. He was being humiliated in front of everyone. Just who do you think you are? You actually dared to attack my wife? Ling Han said coldly. His attacks became even more furious. That's right. What right do you have to attack Nyo? Hunyo fumed, with her hands on her hips. Everyone was rendered speechless. Hunyo hadn't been hurt at all, and it was instead Yu Borong who was being completely suppressed by Ling Han. If anyone were to feel furious, it should have been Yu Borong. Yu Borong roared in rage as he used a trump card, boosting himself with a 2nd grade seal as he unleashed an attack at Ling Han. However, this was utterly useless. Ling Han was someone who possessed a 1st grade seal. He had already enjoyed an advantage before, so after boosting himself with the heavenly venerable seal, he became even more powerful and domineering. Yu Borong was unable to counterattack, and he could only continue to retreat as he was pummeled by Ling Han. Chapter 2946, 2946 Arrival of the Mighty Figures. Chapter 2946, 2946 Arrival of the Mighty Figures. 2946 Arrival of the Mighty Figures. Fortunately, Yu Borong was a 6th tier elite. Even though his cultivation level was suppressed, his body had been tempered by 5 different types of fundamental power before. This was something that wouldn't become weaker. Thus, he could easily withstand Ling Han's attacks. It was just that he would feel a little uncomfortable. 6th tier elites were far more powerful than 5th tier elites. Even though Yu Borong was at a huge disadvantage, he still had a chance to turn the tables on Ling Han. If he could exhaust Ling Han's heavenly venerable seals, and if he still had some remaining, he could rely on them to overcome the gap in power between them. At that time, he could perhaps achieve victory. Of course, he definitely couldn't imagine that Ling Han possessed a whopping 300 or so heavenly venerable seals. Thus, trying to exhaust his heavenly venerable seals? Could he truly withstand Ling Han's relentless attacks for so long? Zhou Heng watched on, not showing any signs of wanting to interfere. Since he didn't interfere, Lin Yaoyan, Xian Chihu, and Feng Wuding naturally couldn't interfere, either. Otherwise, wouldn't they be disrespecting a 6th-tier elite? Only when Yu Borong became bruised and battered did Zhou Heng finally say, Ling Han, that's enough. This is Lord Yu Borong, your senior. Ling Han stepped back and said, Understood, Senior Zhou. Everyone was rendered speechless. They were clearly doing this on purpose. Zhou Heng could have stopped Ling Han a long time ago, yet he insisted on waiting until Yu Borong was beaten to a pulp to stop him. His intention was as clear as day. Yu Borong was extremely disheveled as he huffed and puffed. He was huffing and puffing in pure rage. He glared at Ling Han, and it was as if flames were about to burst from his eyes. This was utter humiliation. He was a mighty 6th-tier elite, yet he had been viciously pummeled before so many people. How could he endure this? However, what could he do? Fight again? But he couldn't defeat Ling Han. Ling Han was clearly at the 4th tier, yet he still couldn't rival him. Thus, he could only endure this. Ling Han looked at Yu Borong and said, I'm truly sorry for offending you, Senior Yu. He even clasped his hands in apology. Yu Borong's expression was extremely dark. He had arrived with arrogance, yet he was now being forced to swallow his anger. This made him lose all his face. He took a deep breath. He definitely couldn't allow himself to be manipulated by Zhou Heng and Ling Han. Right now, the most important thing was to indict Ling Han. Enough with the nonsense. I want to capture Ling Han, so what do you say? He said as he looked squarely at Zhou Heng. I already said. Ling Han explained his situation to senior brother Lin, junior brother Chu, and me a long time ago. All three of us examined his mind, and we concluded that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, Zhou Heng replied calmly. However, his voice was incredibly firm. 3 6th-tier heavenly venerates had reached a consensus on this, so who could change their minds? Zhou Heng, are you hellbent on shielding this traitor? Yu Borong asked in a baleful voice. The investigation hasn't finished yet, so don't speak in such a categorical manner, Zhou Heng said. He appeared especially calm and composed, and he continued, in any case, Ling Han isn't a traitor. He wasn't in the past, he isn't in the present, and he won't be in the future. Heh, Brother Zhou, are your words not a little too exaggerated? Someone said with a chuckle. They looked over, only to see a man walking over. No one saw where he came from, and it was as if he had always been here. Zhou Heng involuntarily became tense, and he said, 10,000 shadows. The 10,000 shadows heavenly venerate, a 6th tier. I'm also of the opinion that things and people can change, another voice said. This was a white-haired old man. His body was covered in crimson scales, and there was also a 3-meter-long tail protruding from his back. Golden silk moth. Zhou Heng's expression became even more solemn. The golden silk moth heavenly venerate was also a 6th tier heavenly venerate. It was said that his true body was that of a golden silk moth, and after becoming a heavenly venerate, he started to undergo a series of transformations. He became a snake, then a wolf, then a tiger, then an elephant, then a phoenix, and then a dragon. If he transformed again, he would advance to the 7th tier and become the most powerful in the world. This was a supremely powerful opponent, and even Zhou Heng didn't dare to say that he could defeat him with confidence. After all, the golden silk moth heavenly venerate was also a profoundly talented person who was only a small step away from advancing to the 7th tier. The reason the golden silk moth heavenly venerate appeared so old was because his golden silk moth cultivation method could truly cause him to die. However, when his corpse became a cocoon, What would emerge from it would be his body, which had undergone 7 transformations. Thus, the older he looked, the more terrifying he would be. I also agree that we should capture him and carefully search his soul, the golden silk moth, Heavenly Venerate, said. Zhou suppressed his anger and said, the mind is extremely important, yet it's also incredibly fragile. Searching Ling Han's soul will inevitably damage his mind and affect his future growth. So what? Is this not what we should do to weed out the spies of hysteria? Yu Borong asked. Weed out you, mom. Ling Han wanted to curse at him, yet he could only suppress his urge after seeing the signal in Zhou Heng's eyes. Since we're unable to reach a consensus, we can only invite the 7th-tier elites over, Zhou Heng said, unleashing his trump card. Not every 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate had the support of a 7th-tier Heavenly Venerate. At the very least, Yu Borong, the Golden Silk Moth Heavenly Venerate, and the 10,000 Shadows Heavenly Venerate didn't. Zhou Heng released a special signal. In just an instant, a terrifying aura descended from the sky. A 7th-tier elite had arrived. This was naturally Lin Luo, and it was only one of his doppelgangers that had arrived. However, being a mighty 7th-tier elite, even his doppelganger was powerful enough to suppress most 6th-tier elites. If Lin Luo's true self arrived, even the unique environment here wouldn't be able to suppress his cultivation. 7th-tier elites had already jumped out from this world and truly achieved transcendence. Thus, they would be able to wield their full power no matter where they were, even in transcendent dimensions. However, this was only a doppelganger, so it naturally couldn't be so powerful. Its cultivation level was also suppressed to the 5th tier. Everyone bowed and said, "Our respects to Lord Lin." Even Zhou Heng, the 10,000 Shadows Heavenly Venerate, and the others bowed in respect. 7th-tier Heavenly Venerates represented heaven and earth, represented true meaning, and represented all matter. Lin Luo nodded in acknowledgement. However, he faltered just as he was just about to speak. Wang. More terrifying auras descended. 1, 2, 3. They were all the doppelgangers of 7th-tier elites. Xian Fu, Chongyan, and Shatter Mountains. Brother Lin, it's better to capture him, Xian Fu said. Fuck. Ling Han cursed in his mind. He then looked at Xian Chihu. It was possible that Xian Fu had been called over by him. Lin Luo glanced at him and said, I believe there's a huge chance that Ling Han will be the key to comprehensively defeating hysteria in the future. As such, we should put our absolute trust in him and help him reach the 7th tier as soon as possible. Reach the 7th tier and help hysteria attack us? Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen said with a sneer. He had come from a different generation and different realm than Lin Luo, so he didn't show an iota of respect toward him. There's no need to say anything else. We already have a candidate who can defeat hysteria, and that person is Feng Wuding, he loudly proclaimed. It was as if he were rectifying Feng Wuding's name. It didn't matter that he had been defeated by Ling Han. After all, Ling Han was hysteria's subordinate. Thinking about this carefully, however, it was quite a hilarious proposition. If Ling Han were genuinely hysteria's subordinate, then how could Feng Wuding defeat hysteria if he couldn't even defeat one of its subordinates? Oh, he couldn't even deal with an underling, yet he could kill the more powerful boss. What an absolute joke. I say that we should kill him, Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin said in a baleful voice. Chapter 29, 47, 29, 47 7th tiers, making their move. Chapter 29, 47, 29, 47 7th tiers, making their move. 29, 47 7th tiers, making their move. I concur, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate said. Concur your mom. Ling Han grumbled in his mind. However, he kept his mouth shut. Lin Luo was standing up for him right now, so he would wait to see if this 7th tier Heavenly Venerate could resolve the problem for him. It would naturally be best if he could resolve the situation. In case he couldn't, however, Ling Han had no intention of standing still and waiting to be captured. Everyone's cultivation would be suppressed here, so unless a 7th tier elite came over with their true body, Ling Han wouldn't be afraid of anyone. In fact, even if a 7th-tier elite did come, Ling Han could still tear apart space and leave. In the void, only Hysteria was powerful enough to rival him. Thus, Ling Han was extremely calm at this moment as he contemplated something else. It was naturally easy for him to leave. However, what about the others? Ling Shi and Ling Jianxue were still claiming new territory in the profound negative realm, so it would be impossible for Ling Han to take them with him. If he left, what would happen to his son and daughter? However, thinking about it a bit more, even though Lin Luo, Zhou Hong, and the others were unable to defend him, using a bit of their power to protect his children would only be a very minor matter. After all, there was a reason to target Ling Han, but there was no reason to target Ling Shi, Ling Jianxue, and the others. Who would dare to disregard the words of 7th-tier elites? The same could be said for the Rain Emperor and the others. This was even more so the case for Bai Meifan. His grandpa was a 7th-tier elite, so who dared to target him? With this in mind, Ling Han finally let go of his worries. If it really came to it, he would simply leave. But where would he go? That would naturally be the Genesis world of the last era. If he truly needed to flee, he would have heaps of time on his hand to explore those ancient dimensions. Lin Luo argued strongly on good grounds, and he even offered to use his own reputation to vouch for Ling Han. If something went wrong, he would shoulder the full responsibility. However, Chong Yin and Shatter Mountains didn't give him an inch. They had both come from the Genesis world of the last era, so why did they need to care about Lin Luo's feelings? Ling Han had to die. Ling Han suspected that this was all because of Feng Wuding. If Ling Han didn't die, then Feng Wuding would forever be seen as a failure. He would always be inferior to Ling Han. Was this conflict being perpetuated by a power struggle between the new and old Genesis world? Ling Han had strong suspicions that Chong Yin and Shatter Mountains were fanning the flames on purpose, with their intention being to kill him, the strongest prodigy in the current Genesis world. There's nothing else to say. Capture him. Chong Yin said coldly. Friend, you're taking things too far. Lin Luo said coldly. He was a 7th-tier elite, someone whose words were more powerful than the heavens. No one had ever defied him before, yet these people were opposing him even after he made a Dao oath to vouch for Ling Han. He was genuinely enraged at this moment. Heh, disposing of spies and traitors is the righteous decision. Friend Lin, are you being a little too selfish? The Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate said as he reached over to grab Ling Han. Lin Luo immediately stepped forward, yet Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin also stepped forward, blocking his path. Old bastard, I've already put up with you for too long. Ling Han roared as he charged at the Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate. Pong! The two of them exchanged a blow. The Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate shuddered slightly, while Ling Han spat blood as he flew through the air. This was the power of a 7th-tier Heavenly Venerate. Even though this was only a doppelganger whose cultivation had been suppressed, he was still unfathomably powerful. However, everyone exclaimed in astonishment, all of them feeling that Ling Han was as freakish as could be. His true cultivation level was only at the 4th tier. Yet, he had only suffered some minor injuries after facing the attack of a 7th-tier elite head-on. This was simply incredible. You're this powerful now, so just how powerful will you be in the future? We definitely can't spare you. The Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate said, his expression changing slightly. However, he didn't feel any shame that he was picking on a 4th-tier Heavenly Venerate, nor did he feel any disappointment that he had failed to kill him with a single strike. He was a 7th-tier elite, the most powerful in the world. What did he need to care about? In his eyes, achieving his goal was the only matter of importance. Die! He charged over again, his attacks extremely vicious as he tried to kill Ling Han. Ling Han released a battle cry as he channeled a heavenly venerable seal, unleashing his fists of fury to face the Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate head-on. He was filled with boundless rage. He was innocent, so why did he have to face such unfair treatment? Were they all blind? Could they not see the contributions he had made to the Flaming Frost realm all these years? Some of them were being willfully blind, and their intention was to kill him. This was for no other reason than jealousy or personal grudges. This was utterly detestable and disgraceful. With such short-sightedness, it was no wonder the Genesis world of the last era had only been able to severely wound hysteria, even after sacrificing its entirety. It had failed to solve the root of the problem. As for this generation, perhaps Ling Han would become powerful enough to kill hysteria in the future. However, if he were killed now, there would naturally be no more future. Taking a step back, even if they only searched his soul and found him to be innocent, what would happen if he were injured during this process? One's mind and divine sense were incredibly important, and these were critical factors that would affect one's future potential. Thus, receiving injuries to these would be equivalent to destroying his future. "Old bastard, did I trample on your grandpa's grave, or did I kill your father?" Ling Han said. He was furious at this moment, so he wouldn't feel good unless he vented his anger. "Don't think that you're invincible and undying. When my battle prowess reaches the 7th tier, I'll make sure to suppress you and trap you under a toilet. I'll have you stink for all eternity." As a 7th tier elite, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's temperament was naturally extremely calm and composed. He wouldn't be affected by such trivial curses. Why was this? This was because his supreme power meant that no one dared to disrespect him. Even if someone did, he could kill them with a single strike. As such, he wouldn't even have the opportunity to become angry. However, this was only his doppelganger, and his cultivation had also been suppressed as well. Thus, he was unable to suppress Ling Han no matter what. This caused him to become increasingly angry, with his brows knitting into a frown. How can there be such a detestable person? His mouth is far too toxic. Yet, there was nothing the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate could do about Ling Han's trump cards. He was only a doppelganger, so he couldn't channel all of the abilities of his true body, such as Heavenly Venerable seals. If this were in the outside world, he could rely on his superior cultivation level to suppress Ling Han. Here, however, he was only slightly more powerful than ordinary 6th-tier elites. Thus, he was completely unable to suppress his opponent. Seeing the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate fail to defeat Ling Han after so long, a look of astonishment involuntarily spread across Heavenly Venerate Chong Yan's face. This brat was going to defy the heavens. "Chong Yan, you can also see. Ling Han's potential is limitless, and it's extremely likely that he's the only person who can defeat hysteria in the future," Lin Luo said. Since Ling Han was temporarily safe, he naturally didn't need to be too worried. Heavenly Venerate Chong Yan humphed and said, "We can't even determine whether he's an ally or an enemy. Who knows if he's a subordinate of hysteria? A single hysteria is already so difficult to deal with, so what will we do if he gains another 7th-tier helper? In any case, we still have Feng Wuding, the son of destiny from the Genesis world of the last era." Hearing his name, Feng Wuding involuntarily stood up a little straighter, making himself seen. Lin Luo simply chuckled in reply. "What's with that expression? What are you trying to say?" Feng Wuding was instantly driven mad. Was he being looked down upon? "You want to kill me? One of you isn't enough. In fact, no number of you will be enough." Ling Han roared. He unleashed a battle cry as he channeled all of his 8th-grade seals at once, causing his power to grow 1,000-fold. Chapter 2948, 2948, Obliterating the Doppelganger of a 7th tier. Chapter 2948, 2948, Obliterating the Doppelganger of a 7th tier. 2948, Obliterating the Doppelganger of a 7th tier. To have one's power increase 1,000-fold. Just what kind of concept was this? At the very least, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's doppelganger couldn't block it. This was only a doppelganger, after all, and its cultivation had also been suppressed. It would have been more shocking if it could rival Ling Han's explosive power. Pong! The Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's doppelganger was instantly sent flying. As his body shuddered, there was also a pulsating glow, and it was as if he were becoming less tangible. This was because his doppelganger wasn't a fleshly body, and it was instead formed from the fundamental power of the Genesis world. As such, it naturally wouldn't spit blood. However, Ling Han's formidable attack almost caused him to crumble. To the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate, having his doppelganger destroyed wouldn't be a big deal. However, he had arrived in such a haughty manner, yet he was now going to be obliterated by a measly fourth-tier heavenly venerate? Just how preposterous would that be? With this in mind, the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate roared and forcefully stabilized his body, causing it to glow in the process. He had used a single wisp of his divine sense and 6 fundamental powers to form this doppelganger. The most important component was his divine sense, and if it was destroyed, he would naturally be unable to regather the other fundamental powers. "Insolent brat, you actually dare to attack me," he roared as he charged at Ling Han. However, while Ling Han's power had grown thousandfold, the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate was unable to use any heavenly venerable seals. Thus, how could he rival Ling Han? Pong, pong, pong. He was sent flying again and again. Everyone was stunned, and they felt as if they were in a dream. That was a 7th-tier elite. Even though it was only a doppelganger, it still shouldn't have been so weak. "Attack you? That's right, my target is you." Ling Han howled. He knew that he couldn't hurt the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate even if he destroyed his doppelganger. However, he could thoroughly humiliate him. Ling Han was eager with anticipation. "Old bastard, you're using the fact that you're a 7th-tier elite to bully me, right? Then come on, show me how you're going to bully me now." Everyone was speechless and transfixed with shock. In their eyes, 7th-tier elites were invincible and omnipotent beings, yet the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate was actually defeated. Indeed, no excuse could change the fact that he had been defeated. "Ling Han, I'll battle you." Feng Wuding roared as he charged over. "You're not worthy of battling against a 7th-tier elite." He was naturally trying to salvage some face for the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate. However, did he think they were all blind? Who hadn't seen the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate being beaten to a pulp? In any case, it was naturally beneath the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate to team up with Feng Wuding. He wanted to retreat, yet Ling Han continued to pursue him and attack, not allowing him to break free. Everyone became even more speechless. Feng Wuding had stepped in to help, yet the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate was still being suppressed by Ling Han anyway. This was truly humiliating. Feng Wuding was very powerful, but Ling Han was even more powerful. He wielded the power of 100 dimensions as he suppressed his opponents. These weren't projections, and they were genuine dimensions. Feng Wuding was absolutely stupefied. One had to realize that his limit was also hosting 100 dimensions. However, he had only managed to nurture 92 so far. As for Ling Han, he had directly unleashed 100 dimensions. Even if this were Ling Han's limit, it was still enough to draw level with him. Feng Wuding thought extremely highly of himself, and his biggest trump card was none other than his 100 dimensions. Now, however, Ling Han had easily drawn level with him. How could he not feel despondent? Was he truly the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era? "Die, you old bastard!" Ling Han roared as he ferociously unleashed his fists of fury. He was going to obliterate his opponent with a single attack, not giving him the chance to recover and regroup. Insolence. Utter insolence. The Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate bellowed in fury. However, he was completely helpless as his body shuddered violently. With a crack, he eventually crumbled and disappeared. Everyone was stunned. They could barely believe their eyes. 7th-tier elites were invincible. This was something that they had firmly believed. Now, however, this belief was crumbling before their eyes. Even though Ling Han had only managed to destroy the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate's doppelganger after teaming up with the restrictions of heaven and earth, everyone chose to ignore this point. They simply knew that a 4th-tier heavenly venerate had obliterated the doppelganger of a 7th-tier elite. In another layer of the realm battlefield, this was a dark and desolate place that seemed much like a void. However, the 10 most powerful people of the Genesis world were all gathered here now, engaged in an intense battle. Their opponent didn't show its true body. Instead, it continued to battle them with its countless tentacles, with each tentacle radiating with boundless power. In fact, these tentacles were so powerful that they could kill a 6th-tier elite with a single strike. This was the battlefield where the 10 supreme 7th-tier elites fought against the main body of Hysteria. It was also thanks to them that Hysteria was unable to focus more of its attention on creating new minions. This helped to reduce the pressure faced by those in the 2 other layers. This was especially the case after Chong-Yin and the others had joined 100 million years ago. Even though they were still at a disadvantage, the extra reinforcements had indeed proved to be extremely helpful. However, a furious and earth-shattering bellow suddenly erupted. The Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate glowed with boundless brilliance, and it was as if even the heavens had to bow before him. Pong, pong, pong. His rage became tangible, causing the space around him to shatter. "Insolent brat!" he roared, an ice-cold expression in his eyes. He was naturally able to sense the destruction of his doppelganger, and this caused him to become wild with fury. He was a 7th-tier elite. A 7th-tier elite. No, he had to personally head over. He had to kill that brat. "Calm down, Shatter Mountains," Lin Luo said. "Don't forget our responsibility." The Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate was beside himself with rage, and he roared, "That brat destroyed my doppelganger. How can I forgive him?" This was utterly humiliating. He was a 7th-tier elite. Heavenly venerate Chong-Yin frowned and said, "His potential is astounding, so if we allow him to develop, who can stop him in the future? We have to seize this opportunity to kill him," the Big Dipper Heavenly Venerate said coldly. Mysterious Feather and Half Moon both nodded in agreement. They had all come from the Genesis world of the last era, so they were naturally of the same mind. "I wholeheartedly disagree," Lin Luo immediately said. "I also disagree," Bai Fan said with a shake of his head. Wu Jihong also shook his head in disagreement. However, he didn't speak. The Blood Rainbow Heavenly Venerate, the 4th 7th tier Heavenly Venerate of the Flaming Frost Realm, also shook his head in disagreement. "Brother Xian, what do you say?" Heavenly Venerate Chong-Yin asked as he looked at Xian Fu. He was confident that Xian Fu would agree with him to kill Ling Han. With 6 in favor and 4 against, things would naturally be settled in their favor. Xian Fu pondered for a moment before saying, "I disagree." "What?" Heavenly Venerate Chong-Yin and the others faltered upon hearing this. Hadn't Xian Fu dispatched a doppelganger to target Ling Han? So, why was he against killing Ling Han now? Had he taken the wrong medicine? Had he been beaten stupid by Hysteria? It was 5 votes to 5 now, so neither side was able to overcome the other. Humph! The Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate humphed before suddenly turning around to leave. He was a 7th-tier elite, someone who could only be suppressed but not killed. Moreover, Hysteria would only gain a slight advantage from this, which would allow it to focus a bit more attention on creating new subordinates. Thus, he could leave whenever he wanted to. He appeared as relaxed as could be. He could act on a whim, but Lin Luo and the others naturally couldn't. If they left, who would stop Hysteria? Moreover, allowing Hysteria to focus more on creating his army would only accelerate the destruction of the Flaming Frost Realm. Whoosh! Tearing open space, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate flew off and vanished without a trace. Chapter 2949, 2949 Rage of a 7th Tier. Chapter 2949, 2949 Rage of a 7th Tier. 2949 Rage of a 7th Tier. Meanwhile, on Ling Han's side, Lin Luo's doppelganger suddenly said, "Ling Han, you should leave now." The Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's true body was about to arrive, and even the dimensional suppression wouldn't be able to affect him. 7th-tier Heavenly Venerates were unstoppable. Ling Han naturally understood what Lin Luo was trying to tell him. He had destroyed the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's doppelganger, so his main body was going to charge over to vent his anger. Sigh, what a narrow-minded bastard. I've been wronged and bullied to such a degree, yet have I flared up in rage yet? Ling Han leaped toward the Empress and Hun Yo. Ling Han, Feng Wooding roared, finally coming to his senses at this moment. He had seen the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's doppelganger being destroyed, so knowing the pride of 7th tier Heavenly Venerate, he knew that the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate would definitely charge over to kill Ling Han at all cost. Thus, he definitely couldn't allow Ling Han to flee. Of course, he didn't believe that Ling Han could flee from the grasp of a 7th tier elite anyway. He charged at Ling Han. "Piss off," Ling Han said as he unleashed his power at Feng Wooding. Wong. He channeled his 100 dimensions, causing his power to increase thousandfold as he sent Feng Wooding flying with a single punch. His raw power, the heavenly venerable seals, and the number of his dimensions. Ling Han enjoyed an advantage in all three areas, so how could Feng Wooding possibly rival him? "See ya later," Ling Han said as he grabbed the Empress and Hu Niu in his arms. "Everyone, we'll definitely meet again in the future. Fiery Silk, Yu Borong, and 10,000 Shadows. I've remembered you three. Of course, there's also you." His gaze became ice-cold as he pointed at Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin. "Humph, you think you can escape?" Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin sneered. His cultivation was suppressed, and he couldn't necessarily capture Ling Han, but obstructing him and preventing him from escaping wouldn't be too difficult. Once the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate arrived, Ling Han would be as good as dead. No, he had already become a dead person the moment that he destroyed the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's doppelganger. "If I want to leave, no one will be able to stop me, not you, and not anyone else." Ling Han waved goodbye as he tore open the void. "Where do you think you're going?" Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin roared as he charged over. He thought that Ling Han was trying to teleport. Whoosh! Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin gave chase. However, to say nothing of the fact that he was only a doppelganger, he would lose his way in the void even if this were his true body. This was a domain that was beyond him. "Not good," he exclaimed in his mind. Wong. A devastating aura descended as the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate arrived. His power was far too terrifying, so much so that even the surrounding space trembled in his presence, teetering on the brink of shattering. "Where's that insolent brat?" he asked as he swept his gaze around. Lord Shatter Mountains, Ling Han tore open the void and fled. "Lord Chong Yin is currently giving chase," Feng Wooding hurriedly replied. "He's trying to teleport and flee?" the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate said with a cold chuckle. Teleportation was a skill within the regulations, so how far could Ling Han flee? He immediately released his divine sense, and his overwhelming power as a 7th tier elite allowed him to instantly observe every corner of the flaming frost realm. However, he didn't discover anything. What's going on? Don't tell me he directly teleported to another dimension. Is that still teleportation? Whoosh! He looked over, only to see Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin return at this moment. Without any dimensional coordinates, he had been forced to return the same way that he had left. This was the rule of the void, and this was something that even 7th tier elites couldn't overcome. "Where is he?" the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate asked. "That brat has the ability to travel between dimensions. He's fled," Heavenly Venerate Chong Yin replied. "What?" The Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate faltered upon hearing this. He then howled in boundless rage. Boom! His roar materialized into something tangible, its power so great that even the 6th tier Heavenly Venerates felt pain in their chest, making them want to vomit blood. Meanwhile, blood flowed from all orifices of the Heavenly Venerates who were under the 6th tier. This was a harrowing sight. This was the terrifying might of a 7th tier elite. However, everyone shook their head inwardly. It was understandable why the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate was so furious. His doppelganger had been destroyed in front of so many people, so how could he not go wild with rage? He had then come to kill Ling Han, yet he hadn't even been able to catch a glimpse of this insolent brat. Unable to vent his boiling anger, it was only natural that he bellowed to express his rage. However, he was a supremely powerful 7th tier elite, so his bellows were truly difficult to endure for the others. "Give chase. Immediately look for him," The Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate said coldly, "We definitely have to find this traitor. I'm going to kill him with my own hands." "Understood," everyone replied. They had no option but to comply. After all, this was a 7th-tier elite whose words were more powerful than the heavens. Ah! Still unable to suppress his rage, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate unleashed 7 palm strikes toward Hysteria's army. Pung! The enemy encampment was instantly obliterated and flattened. Only then did he turn around to leave. Whoosh! He returned to the main battlefield. Everyone was left speechless after witnessing the profound might of a 7th-tier elite. Only after a long while did they start to discuss this with spirit. So a 7th-tier elite is actually this powerful. Why don't they send a 7th-tier elite over here? If we have such a powerful elite, won't this place become impregnable? You're getting too ahead of yourself. Even though 7th-tier elites won't be suppressed by this dimension, their presence and power are so great that they'll end up causing damage to the dimension. No matter how many enemies they kill, they'll still end up providing more help to the enemy, thereby accelerating the advance of Hysteria. Moreover, the most important battlefield is the main battlefield. If they fail to obstruct Hysteria and allow it to charge over, the destruction of the flaming frost realm will be imminent. Then, should we look for Ling Han? Heh, can you defeat Ling Han? No. Then there's your answer. Whoever can defeat him can go and look for him. What's the point of us going? To seek death? The task of looking for Ling Han could only be handed to the 6th-tier elites. Otherwise, the others wouldn't be able to make it back alive with the news even if they managed to find him. Of course, this was assuming that Ling Han was truly Hysteria's subordinate. The problem was, if they didn't think that Ling Han was Hysteria's subordinate, who would go and look for him? Thus, this task could only be left to the 6th-tier elites. Exine Chihu turned around and said, "You guys stay here. I'm going to look for Ling Han." "I'll go as well," Feng Wuding hurriedly said. "No, we need 3 people to stay here," Exine Chihu said, rejecting his request. Feng Wuding still wanted to speak. However, he knew that he was weaker than Exine Chihu, so if only one of the 4 could go, Exine Chihu would naturally be more suitable. Lin Yulian and Wu Haoyang didn't oppose him. They didn't want to become enemies with Ling Han, and they more so didn't believe that he had betrayed the Genesis world. Thus, they naturally wouldn't volunteer to go. Exine Chihu set off, leaving the realm battlefield and heading to the Genesis world of the last era. He was certain that this was Ling Han's destination. Putting himself in Ling Han's shoes, this would definitely be the best place to hide and bide his time. Ling Han tore open the void and returned to the Genesis world. This was the profound negative realm, and he was going to look for his son and daughter first. He was going to ask for their opinions. However, both Ling Shi and Ling Jianxue wanted to stay in the profound negative realm. They wanted to continue their role of expanding its territory. "Then be careful," Ling Han said with a nod. He respected his children's decision. Moreover, there were also Lin Luo, Zhou Hong, and the others to watch over them, so his children wouldn't be implicated because of him. Ling Han left with the Empress and Hu Niu, heading directly to the Genesis world of the last era. This time, he wanted to raise his battle prowess to the 7th tier, or perhaps even stronger. He would then return for vengeance. Chapter 2950, 2950 Enemy of the World. Chapter 2950, 2950 Enemy of the World. 2950 Enemy of the World. Ling Han was insanely quick, and he arrived in the Genesis world of the last era in just 7 years. In terms of traveling through the void, it was very likely that only Hysteria was quicker than him. Ling Han and his 2 wives immediately began to search for a spatial passageway that would take them to a deeper dimension. Once Ling Han's battle prowess reached the 7th tier, they would no longer need to go to so much trouble. He could directly charge down, ignoring the chaotic winds and origin flames. "Those people are so detestable," Hu Niu said with a pout. She placed her hands on her hips and continued. "They actually dared to smear Niu's Ling Han. Niu is going to kill them all." She was extremely angry as she said this. In fact, She had never been an extremely kind person to begin with, and she had more so been as ferocious as a tiger when she had been young. The Empress glanced at her and said, "You're too weak, so you're merely speaking nonsense. Wayaya, you huge vixen, you actually dare to doubt Nyo?" Hunyo said in anger. The Empress simply replied with a chuckle. Nothing else needed to be said, and her intent was as clear as could be. Ling Han gestured for them to calm down. Of course, the two women had only been bickering, and there was nothing more to it than that. In fact, that wasn't too bad. At the very least, I was able to determine who's on my side and who wants me to die, Ling Han said. Also, we have enough time to look through this place now, Hunyo said with a giggle. Indeed, the Empress said with a nod. Otherwise, we'd be forced to battle against Hysteria's army in the realm battlefield. However, since they view us as traitors now, we naturally don't need to help them anymore. All right, I'll cultivate until my battle prowess reaches the 7th tier before leaving, Ling Han said with a hearty laugh. They arrived at the 13th dimension. They could only call this the 13th dimension and not the 13th layer because they had come here through a spatial passageway. Thus, they were unable to determine which layer this dimension belonged to. However, this didn't matter. What mattered was how much they could obtain from this place. The three of them kept an extremely low profile and remained extremely cautious. They were enemies of the entire world, after all, so they naturally couldn't expose their location. Otherwise, they would be hunted by the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate. At that time, Ling Han's only option would be death, regardless of how freakish he was. There were countless treasures here, but one needed to overcome many difficulties and also possess a good fortune to obtain them. Chaotic storms of energy swept through the dimension, filling every corner with danger. Even with battle prowess at the 6th tier, Ling Han still needed to be extremely careful. After all, his body had only been tempered by 3 fundamental powers, so his physique was still quite a long way off from reaching the 6th tier. This was quite an interesting quirk. In the past, Ling Han's physique had always been more powerful than his cultivation. Now, however, it was the opposite. The indestructible Heaven Scroll was already unable to keep up with his cultivation, and Ling Han didn't have any plan to raise it to the next level either. This was because the indestructible Heaven Scroll was subject to numerous limitations. It was created by a first-tier heavenly venerate, so it naturally didn't possess any information on the 6 fundamental powers. Moreover, to put it simply, the strength of a heavenly venerate was directly correlated to their mastery of the fundamental powers. Ling Han had a whole heap of time now, so he started to focus his concentration on cultivation. Since he didn't need to worry about the situation on the battlefield, Ling Han could naturally focus all of his attention on cultivation. He continued to search for veins of, or as he grew his strength. Following his slight advance in cultivation, the powers of dimension inside him also started to grow. He could now hold a maximum of over 200 dimensions. Thus, he needed to spend a lot of time to grow these dimensions to their full potential. If these dimensions grew a little, Ling Han's battle prowess would also grow a little. In the blink of an eye, over 4 million years passed. Ling Han's cultivation did indeed grow a little. However, he still had yet to reach the late stage of the 4th tier. There were far too few raw stone veins here. With the terrifying amount of energy that he needed to improve his cultivation, this lack of raw stone veins was completely unable to support him. Even so, his cultivation speed was indeed a little faster in this place. However, it was only faster to a limited extent. This was inevitable as the environment became increasingly hostile the deeper he traveled through the group of dimensions. The heaven and earth also became increasingly shattered. Thus, it was only natural that there were few heavenly venerable stones. However, even though there were fewer raw stones, the quality of each was higher. In fact, there were even 4th-grade heavenly venerable seals. If Ling Han ventured to the deeper dimensions, perhaps there would be 3rd-grade, 2nd-grade, or even 1st-grade seals. Ling Han suddenly faltered at this moment. He could sense several auras rapidly moving toward them. Who is it? He didn't tear open the void to leave straight away. This was because the auras were powerful, but they were nowhere near the level of 7th tier elites. He wasn't afraid of anyone under the 7th tier. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 11 people quickly appeared before Ling Han. In fact, it wasn't entirely accurate to refer to them as people. 8 of them were indeed people, but 3 of them were monsters with numerous arms, legs, and heads. 3 of Hysteria's creations, plus Huang Fu Dongyue, and the 7 other spies. Ling Han, you've already been abandoned by everyone in the Genesis world, Huang Fu Dongyue said. Why don't you return to the main body? You're one of us, and you also have a spiritual mark left by the main body. We're countless times more noble than those fragile life forms. If you abandon your incorrect ways and adopt what is right, the main body is willing to forgive your crimes. Ling Han roared with laughter and said, All right then, I'll switch sides right away. Then return with me to the main body. There's something it wants to say to you, Huang Fu Dongyue said. Ling Han scoffed and said, I'm not under Hysteria's control, and my battle prowess is also immense, far beyond its imagination. Is Hysteria getting anxious? Something to say to me? It merely wants to kill me and examine my corpse. Ling Han, what's the point of resisting? Huang Fu Dongyue said. Have you forgotten about how you were treated by the others in the Genesis world? Ling Han nodded and replied, I naturally haven't forgotten who forced me into this situation. Heh, we were merely speaking the truth, Huang Fu Dongyue said with a smile. Ling Han, there's nowhere else for you to go. Even 7th tier elites are hunting you now, and once they find you, your only option will be death. With such a bright future, why do you insist on sticking with the Genesis world? Do they care that you were wronged? Will they empathize with you? Ling Han roared with laughter and said, It's been a few million years since I last saw you, and your eloquence has truly seen some improvement. Go back and tell Hysteria to clean its neck. I'll personally chop it off one day. Ling Han, what if Hysteria has several heads? Which neck do you want it to clean? Hunyo said with a giggle. Indeed, Ling Han said with a nod. Hearing this, Huang Fu Dongyue didn't say anything else. It was clear that Ling Han possessed an extremely strong willpower and wouldn't be swayed by him. Then his only option was to battle. He couldn't help but sigh. This was the last resort, and it would be extremely difficult to stop Ling Han from traveling through the dimensions. Since you're unwilling to yield to Master, you'll ultimately be annihilated by Master's brilliance. Chapter 2951, 2951 Challenge at Every Step. Chapter 2951, 2951 Challenge at Every Step. 2951 Challenge at Every Step. Ling Han roared with laughter, saying, What dogsh asterisk T brilliance? Come on, show me? Die! The 3 6th-tier monsters charged over, with each of them unleashing their full strength. They were going to put Ling Han under so much pressure that he would have no time to tear open the void to flee. Unfortunately for them, Ling Han's strength had grown by a considerable amount during the past several million years, even though his cultivation hadn't improved by much. While he was still unable to rival those at the peak stage of the 6th tier, he could at the very least defend against them. Ling Han was at a disadvantage, but there was no need for him to worry about getting killed. Not in the short term, at least. Capture those 2. Huang Fu Dongyue said with a wave of his hand. He then charged toward the Empress and Hunyo with the 7 other people. Ling Han naturally wouldn't allow them to succeed. He forcefully broke free before drawing the Empress and Hunyo into the celestial guest residence. Standing tall and proud, he said, If you want to fight, then come at me. Ling Han, your treason will only lead to death, Huang Fu Dongyue said. How noisy, Ling Han said with a humph. He then threw a powerful punch. Huang Fu Dongyue naturally couldn't block this attack. However, the 3 6th-tier monsters immediately stepped forward to block Ling Han's attack for him. Why struggle like this? Huang Fu Dongyue asked with a smile. Once you return to the main body, you'll be able to obtain unfathomable power. At that time, you'll be able to crush those who dared to humiliate you under your feet. His words of persuasion naturally weren't sincere. Instead, He was purposely trying to shake Ling Han's will. Simply listening to him would affect Ling Han's battle prowess by a tiny bit. He was already at a disadvantage, so this small effect would be magnified into something much greater. However, Ling Han remained extremely calm and composed as he continued to swing his fists. From time to time, he would also release his 200 or so dimensions, and their power was so overwhelming that even the 3 6th-tier monsters would be slightly affected. In fact, the 3 6th-tier monsters would be less afraid of him if he directly used these dimensions as weapons. After all, shattering these dimensions would only be a matter of time. However, Ling Han was only using these dimensions to threaten them, and this made their situation far more difficult. Ling Han's quick release and retraction of these dimensions would cause their attacks to go awry and their reactions to become slow. This affected them greatly. At the same time, this also allowed Ling Han to continue his resistance. Otherwise, regardless of how freakish he would still be unable to rival 3 monsters at the peak stage of the 6th tier. To say nothing of 3, he wouldn't even be able to rival 1. However, no matter how he resisted, the 3 6th-tier monsters still maintained an absolute advantage. It wasn't long before Ling Han was riddled with wounds, falling into a precarious situation. "Let's not play around anymore," Ling Han said in his mind. If he continued to battle, however, that wouldn't be testing his battle prowess anymore. Instead, that would be seeking death. Ling Han fled, and the 3 6th-tier monsters gave chase. They were all lightning quick, with the boundless mountains and rivers being left far behind them. Interestingly, they would occasionally come to a screeching halt, and this was because they had to stop before the devastating storms of energy. Even 6th-tier elites would be severely wounded if they tried to forcefully travel through these storms of energy. These storms didn't favor anyone, and they would stop Ling Han at some times, while they would stop the 3 6th-tier monsters at other times. Broadly speaking, these storms were still relatively fair. Thus, the distance between them neither grew nor shrunk. Ling Han. A person suddenly appeared in front of Ling Han. Xian Chihu. Without saying anything else, he directly launched an attack at Ling Han. Boom! This was a devastating attack unleashed by someone with a battle prowess at the peak stage of the 6th tier. Ling Han had no option but to engage in battle with Xian Chihu. His body shuddered, and his internal organs were also in turmoil, causing him to feel extremely uncomfortable. It was also at this moment that the 3 6th-tier monsters arrived. Boom! Even though these 3 monsters were Hysteria's subordinates, and even though they were hostile to all beings from the Genesis world, it was quite clear that they still understood what was more important. Right now, their attention and attacks were fully focused on Ling Han. What's wrong? Having an internal squabble? Xian Chihu said as he unleashed another attack at Ling Han. However, he also unleashed an attack at the 3 monsters. "Are you stalking me, or something? Why do I see you everywhere?" Ling Han said with a humph. He hurriedly stabilized his body, allowing his battle prowess to reach its full potential. He was being attacked by 4 6th-tier elites now, so he was at an even greater disadvantage. Using his dimensions to buy a bit of time, he immediately turned around to flee again. Pong, pong, pong. Xian Chihu and the 3 6th-tier monsters immediately gave chase, not forgetting to battle each other at the same time. This caused the situation to become incredibly chaotic. However, it also bought Ling Han more time to escape, allowing him to pull further and further away from his enemies. "I'm genuinely disliked by both sides now, huh? Everyone wants to kill me," Ling Han murmured. However, his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. The more pressure he was under, and the more unfairly he was treated, the more motivated he would become. This would allow him to dig even deeper to realize his potential. He cultivated in seclusion for a short time, digesting the comprehension that he had gained from the battle. This kind of life-and-death situation would allow him to gain the most enlightenment. He started to deduce the heavenly venerable seals. After reaching the 3rd tier, heavenly venerates would have the right to deduce heavenly venerable seals. Regarding how many of them could succeed and what grade of seals they would be able to deduce, this was a completely different matter altogether. Ling Han possessed far too many heavenly venerable seals right now, so he wanted to use a 7th grade seal that he already owned to deduce a neighboring seal. If he succeeded, he would be able to obtain more combination seals. This was far more useful than deducing a random seal. Why didn't he try to deduce a 1st grade seal? Just how difficult would that be? Perhaps he could succeed, but that would perhaps take 100 million years or even 1 billion years. Ling Han felt like improving his cultivation was more important. After 30,000 years, Ling Han successfully deduced a 3rd grade seal. If news of this traveled out, countless people's jaws would drop in shock. To deduce a heavenly venerable seal in just 30,000 years? I have far too many advantages. There are countless dimensions inside me, and they're already showing signs of growing into a Genesis world. Combined with the resonance with the other heavenly venerable seals and my comprehension from that battle, I only needed 30,000 years to deduce this heavenly venerable seal, Ling Han said to himself. Having fully digested the comprehension from his battle against the 4 6th-tier elites, Ling Han chose to exit seclusion. He continued to look for raw stone veins, yet he discovered that this place was gradually becoming livelier and livelier, with more and more 6th-tier elites arriving. Perhaps they were also here to look for raw stones, but if they encountered Ling Han, they definitely wouldn't mind unleashing a few attacks. Ling Han's situation became dire, with an enemy around almost every corner. This was because this broken dimension was far too small. Several years later, Ling Han found a spatial passageway that allowed him to enter a different dimension. He was most likely the first person to enter this dimension as there was no sign of excavation in the surroundings. Perhaps I can advance to the peak stage of the 4th tier here. Ling Han immediately began to search for veins of ore. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.